Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for January 19th, 2023. Please rise as we start our meetings for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Before we proceed, let's introduce ourselves, starting on the far left, please.
Good evening, Richard Tripp.
Crystal Morin, Secretary.
I'm Lynn Perkins, the Chair.
Craig Corbett, Vice Chair.
Alan Vera.
Member.
Donald Burgess.
And we have Robert Mackey, Code Enforcement, with us, and our clerk, Jenny Rio, is in the back. She'll be taking the minutes. Please be advised that these proceedings are audio-video recorded, scheduled to end at 10 p.m. Anybody, in the event of an emergency, please exit to the rear of the room and don't use the elevator. Someone will assist you if you need aid there. Also, please shut off all cell phones, iPads, iPhones, any electronic gadget that could create a distraction to the proceedings. And we will commence right now. The first case for the evening is the Kurt Meisner, Brem Corp., and that is case number 23-102.
101.
101, I'm sorry. I made the correction myself and I still got it wrong. That is for the owner, Donald F. Ball, Irrevocable Trust, and Douglas Ball, trustee. So with that, we can proceed. You would be...
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Kurt Meisner. I'm with Meisner Brem Corporation.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Meisner. Hang just a second.
I am going to allow an alternate to sit, and Mr. Ditton.
Very good. Mr. Dietzel, would you please sit on this case?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, and just a note, Michael Donlin, who is an alternate, is remote with us this evening, and he's out there. Sorry, Mr. Donlin. Didn't mean to ignore you there. So, Mr. Meisner, you are all set to proceed. Our protocols that we have you read the 5 criteria to open with, and then proceed
Sure.
with your own commentary.
Sure. Okay, so the first application that we have this evening is at 53 English Range Road, and we are requesting a variance for frontage for a 3-lot subdivision. The variance will not be contrary to the public interest because the granting of the variance will not impact the character of the neighborhood. Each house lot will have a DES-approved state septic system installed to assure that there's no threat to the health, safety, or welfare of the neighbors. The proposed driveways will have good visibility, and the large wooden barns that are adjacent to the road will be removed. The spirit of the ordinance is observed because the enacted frontage requirement is to provide adequate spacing between the dwellings. All of the proposed lots are over 3 acres in size, and they provide adequate room and spacing for these dwellings. The homes will be set back from the road to preserve the scenic view, and no stone walls or trees will be disturbed in the process of construction. Substantial justice will be done. The lots will have conforming area and more. The denial of the variance will have no apparent gain to the community or the public. The new homeowners would have an opportunity to live in the picturesque area of English Range Road. The approval will permit the land to be used in its most useful potential. Additionally, the removal of the barns will benefit the community. The values of the surrounding properties will not be diminished because the proposed use is allowed in the district, and it mimics the nearby properties in size and appearance. The future dwellings will be of equal or greater value than the surrounding properties. The literal enforcement of the provisions of this ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. The denial of the variance does not result in any appreciable gain to the community or the public. The proposed subdivision has received the State of New Hampshire NHDES subdivision approval. The proposed house lots will have state-approved septic systems on each of the lots. They will be installed to ensure the protection of the groundwater. The proposed use is a reasonable one because the proposed lots will be used for residential purposes, which is the same manner of the adjacent lots, and the proposed dwellings will meet all the other zoning setbacks and requirements in the zone. So that's the 5 criteria.
Now you can put it in your own words as you like.
I will. I will just need to grab my plans. So what we have this evening is a proposal. We have an 11-acre parcel on the west side of English Range Road. We are just slightly deficient on frontage. So what we did was we are about 75 feet, I think, short of frontage for the lots, and we broke it up into 175-foot sections for each lot. There is an old barn, and I assume, or maybe I'm not right, but I think you folks have gone out to look at the site. There's an old wooden barn that's up very, very close to the road, and a fieldstone barn that's just in behind that. Those barns will both be removed and residential houses built out behind that area. When we met with the town and the staff, we paid a lot of attention to the scenic road and what happens out there, and we felt that this was the best way to divide this land and to come up with a layout for the lots. They'll all be, there's a very small wetland in the back of the property where the existing brook is. Everything will be well offset from that. And again, I know you folks understand that this, should you folks approve this evening, it still needs to go to the planning board, and they will scrutinize the soils, the wetlands, and the layout of the lots additionally there. I did provide you with an assessors map or a GIS map of the area. And on that GIS map, I'm gonna flip over my presentation board so I can point to it.
Excuse me.
And the reason that we submitted this plan to you is to show you a number of the properties in the area that have less than the 200 feet of frontage. And those lots are these right here, a couple of those lots down there. And what if you see on the submittal that we gave you, anything with the frontage denoted in blue, again, there's lots right there, all of these lots in here, and then these lots down here. So we feel that our subdivision here mimics these here, this one down in this area here. So it's very similar to the other properties in the neighborhood. Again, it's important to point out that we meet all other regulations as far as building setbacks and anything that would have a planning board issue with it. We can fit houses on these very comfortably.
Let me just pause you there right for a second there, Mr. Meisner. Mr. Preventure, I know you're wandering in the room. Can we get a camera on that subdivision map that Mr. Meisner's just pointed out? I know there's folks that are interested in that, and so just have you recap that for a moment, Mr. Meisner, as soon as we get it on camera. How's that? Just go ahead and brush through that again, if you would.
So the main point of this particular exhibit is to indicate other lots in the neighborhood that have less than the 200 feet of frontage. And those lots would be this lot here, then two of these lots here, these two across, this grouping right down in there, another one in here, these two lots there. So the point is that we wanted to show you is that there are many other lots in the neighborhood that have less than the 200 feet of frontage. And in fact, when you look at these three lots here that we're proposing, they're very similar to these lots here, and then this grouping down here. You can see a little further down, there was a lot that was created. I'll say it's kind of an odd shape, but that one's right there. Those also have less than the 200 feet of frontage. So with the lots, the way they're laid out, they do have sufficient space and area for anything that would be normal to a single-family home, and that is the intention, to build single-family homes on each of these lots. So when I say that, I mean a house, a deck, a shed, a driveway, potentially a detached garage, or they are larger lots and they have plenty of space. So with that, I'll end my presentation and answer questions for you.
What is the history on this zoning district? Do you, either Mr. Mackey or Mr. Meisner, know how long ago we changed that, or what that 3-acre, 200-foot frontage was?
I believe that the current low-density residential zone was put in place back in the late 80s, I want to say around 87. Prior to that, it would have been the typical 1 acre with 125 feet of frontage. At that point, everything basically residential was zoned general residential, which was 1 acre with 125 feet of frontage.
And Mr. Meisner, the area that would be more westerly of this lot, probably, it looks like it's kind of shaded purple or gray from here.
That spot?
Yeah, all of that, is that in this district as well?
Is it, I didn't hear, is it what?
Is that in the LDR as well currently?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry?
The street's Buttonwood.
Yeah, something like that. Well, even further past that, yeah. Anybody have any questions? Mr. Tripp, Mr. Dietzel, Mr. Burgess, Mr. Burr, anybody?
I have questions.
Mr. Tripp?
So is there public water there?
There is not public water. They would be private septic systems and wells put on here. And that's why I had pointed out that we do have DES approval, and that approval is basically for water supply and septic wastewater. So the state's looked at it already to confirm that what we're doing is allowable as far as the state is concerned.
Right, and you've tore down the existing buildings already.
Well, we haven't torn them down, but they will be torn down as a part of this project, yeah. If you noticed, if you went out there, they're in pretty poor shape right now.
Oh, well, if it's not being used as a farm, that's what happens when buildings get old. Is English Range a state road?
No, I don't believe it is.
All right, so there's no issue with curb cuts?
No. And when you ask about curb cuts, I've been out on the site a number of times. The sight distance in either direction is very good, and I'm absolutely confident that we can produce driveways that will meet the town's requirements. And as I was saying before, we'll still need to go to the planning board, and they'll make sure that all of that, those issues are taken care of.
No,
So there's a governing board. Once, if we get beyond you folks, then the planning board will, they'll make sure that we do it properly.
well, it's always good to know what possible problems there might be. So it looks like you've investigated it fairly thoroughly.
We've done, and by the way, these plans that we're showing you this evening are maybe more than what you're used to seeing. These are all detailed surveys. We've done the property line, the boundary survey, the topographic survey, soils. This is all real engineering work. So there's no, this isn't concept work that was done on tax maps and plans from the state. This is real work.
So I'd like to piggyback off of Mr. Tripp's question for a minute, though, and that goes to the transition of the zoning district. The expansion of lot size and frontage a lot of times is to curb growth or help control it or soften it. But to Mr. Tripp's point in your presentation, which is DES approval, sometimes development regulations are designed based off the normal soil type in the area, where so much consumption of septage, only so much can be absorbed into the ground because of the type of soil. To that point, Mr. Mackey, did we do this in the late 80s as kind of a growth measure to keep that kind of, look out there, or was it because of soil?
I think it was primarily as a growth measurement. That was back in the day when the town instituted a growth management ordinance because the town was growing so rapidly and the schools were getting overcome. So increased the lot acreage sizes back then to help slow it down. I think at that point there was like a limit of 50 new building permits for new homes each year, that sort of thing. So mainly was for that purpose.
The Balls have owned this property for how long?
The Balls have owned it, I'm not exactly sure the total length of time, but I know they did own it, I think as far back as 1910 or 1915. So it's quite a long time.
Predates the zoning.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, and there's been no transition of that ownership since then.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, very good. Anybody else? Mr. Tripp, back to you.
I noticed on the map that I have that it appears that the conservation land in back, do you know how large of a area that is?
Are we talking about, I'm going to just flip my map
Yeah,
back.
you're not referring to the next case on the agenda, but the one more westerly of this, Mr. Tripp?
Well, I don't know. Is the rear of the lot, you said it's wetland?
So the wetland that I talked about, there's a brook that runs down along this property line here.
Okay.
And we have had that flagged and determined by Luke Hurley of Gove Environmental Services.
But, so you're not going to give that for conservation land?
So, Mr. Tripp, if I can, that's the next case? You've got the
Yeah.
conservation land mixed up.
Yeah,
No,
no,
I'm asking.
You've got the conservation land mixed up. It's
All
not
right.
well,
that parcel.
it's not part of this proposal to do what you're asking, no.
Oh, well, then I'm wrong.
It's all right.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Corbett.
just go back to your point of ownership, just looking back at the transfer from the deed from the trust over to the younger Mr. Ball. It looks like they've owned it since at least 1924.
All right, very good. Thank you. Mr. Corbett, to that point, you have any questions?
No, I did have a question about the type of houses that were going to be proposed on the property. However, the third page of drawings that were provided to us details that it's going to be for single-use houses.
Sure. Those houses that we've shown you there are just sort of a generic proposal of a potential home. We envision these will all be single-family homes, colonial style in nature, and what we have here is sort of I'll call it a generic footprint of a colonial building with a two-car garage attached to it. The particular style may vary, but it will certainly, the location of the property, the scenic road, probably the value of the property is going to determine what the houses will be, how they will be built. But we envision colonial style, I guess I'll call it your typical colonial.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Burr, you all set?
All set.
Mr. Burgess, how about you?
I'm good.
Okay, very good. Anybody else down on my left? What's up?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Fair enough. Mr. Meisner, you have anything else you'd like to add? We're going to go to public here pretty soon.
No, I'm all set for right now.
Okay, very good. So, Mr. Mackey, before we do that, we've tagged you for a couple of questions, but if you have anything to follow up with on a complete staff, please feel free.
No, other than obviously LDR, low-density residential zoning, so talking 3-acre minimum lot size with 200 feet of frontage. I believe each one of these lots being proposed has 175 feet, one just a little bit more than that. Again, it was already brought out, it's no town water out there, so private wells, private septics. They will need to provide, should this be approved, they would need to provide fire protection, either in the form of a cistern or a residential sprinkler. That's typically a note that would be handled through the whole TRC process and the planning board process. Again, were this to be approved by the board, the next step would be scheduling it to go before the technical review committee. Well, that will be picked up on. Other than that, I took some pictures. It was mentioned about the old barn out there. There is, unfortunately, the fate of a lot of old barns these days, but pretty sad shape. So it's been on our property maintenance list, so sad to say, but good to see that problem would be taken care of. So.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Mackey. Any questions from Mr. Mackey before we move on? Oh, okay, very good. So we'll make a call to public. Mr. Preventure, we have some phone numbers to forecast there, and Mr. Corbett, you want to help out with there?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Anybody at home who wishes to dial in, you'll dial 646-558-8656. Your meeting ID is 323-909-140, and you'll press *9 to raise your hand. If you're having any technical issues, please dial 603-845-5585, and someone will be happy to help you.
And with that announcement made, we'll make a call to the public. At this point, anybody wishing to speak to this application in support of it, this would be your opportunity to do so now, and that also applies to those who are remote. There's rules of engagement. As I understand, there's a lot of interest here. Just understand that this board, its purview is over 5 criteria, and you heard those criteria introduced by the applicant initially, and only those who are directly abutters or may be aggrieved and can prove that aggrieved status may speak to this and ask questions or for clarity or make their concerns known. With that being said, anybody here wish to speak in favor of this application? Seeing no one rise. Mr. Preventure, you got anybody out there?
Seeing none, rise online, Mr. Chair.
All right, very good. So in that case, we will go to the next option, which is anyone who is opposed to this application. This would be your opportunity to come up and speak to that matter. Anybody here wish to speak on this matter? Seeing no one rise.
I have some questions.
Well, this was your opportunity. So, Mr. Meisner, if you could excuse yourself, come right up here and have a seat. Are you a direct abutter?
I am. I
Okay.
am a direct abutter.
Very good.
And
For the record, we'll have you sit
questions-
down and give us your name, please,
I have questions about the well situation.
and your address.
My name's Wendy Gleason. I live in the lot next door.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if we could just ensure proximity to the microphone.
Yes, could you pull the microphone to you, please? Thank you.
Sure. So the well situation, we're in a drought right now, and 3 wells being drilled there. Mr. Mesner mentioned that the DES has come out, but have they found, adequate groundwater, adequate aquifers, all that kind of study? Has that all been done?
Okay.
Because I do have a well, and it's the second one on the property. After the Buttonwood development went in, my dad, who lived in the house then, who has, has passed away since, he found he needed to drill another well. The Buttonwood property wound up with some kind of a utility of their own, I think, instead of many drilled wells. But it did take all the water away from our property. So that's my concern with 3 wells next door.
Okay.
And also, whether or not DES did find that there was adequate water in the ground, and you mentioned something about the soil absorbing the septic. I just want to find out more about all that. And I don't know if this is the time to ask or who specifically can answer those questions, but also as far as the impinging on the character of the neighborhood, I tend to disagree with the statement that it doesn't, because the 3 lots side by side, all lined up there, will definitely channel a lot of, traffic, construction, noise for I don't know how long. But I don't think if the houses are going to be sited right, similar to what it shows there, that's going to be kind of high density, in that little parcel. And definitely, I think things are spread out better in some of the other areas that he pointed out where the frontage was less than 200 feet. The properties may be staggered a little bit better than that. So
The other parcels are probably more sporadic. Development on that area has been slow. Sound about right? And I know some of the parcels that are out there are much bigger.
Yeah.
There's a couple of them. So you're less apt to see structures here and there.
Right, right. But these are all, it looks like very visible, right, close to the road. I wonder what the setback is.
So Ms. Gleason, so I'm following. So for the 3 areas, kind of the concern is that the 3 houses are directly in the line, whereas if you were looking at the area further down the road, the houses are staggered throughout the property, kind of north and south, so to speak. Is that all right? Thank you.
All right, so we'll ask these, Mr. Meisner will have an opportunity to answer to those concerns or questions when he rebuts.
Okay, and also just the stone walls won't be affected, he said. There are 2 stone walls, like a little cow path.
Could we get you close to the mic, please?
There's a stone wall right on my property line, and then there's another stone wall on the Ball's property line that is it looks like an old historic cow path. I wonder if the stone wall on their side will be taken down.
Okay. Good. Anything else?
Not at the moment.
All right, very good. Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in opposition here? Anybody out there remotely?
Chair, we do have a hand raised.
Okay, very good. Bring that person in.
This is Mr. Will Lowenthal.
Okay.
We'll bring him in as a panelist here so he can speak and share his camera.
Was it Will?
He is not.
Mr. Preventure, what was the name again?
Will Lowenthal.
Okay, all right.
We'll ask him to unmute at this time.
Yes, hello. I'm sorry, but my hand was not raised. I am not a direct abutter of this property. I have interest in the next presentation.
Okay. Do you wish to wait for the next one, or?
We'll go ahead and lower his hand.
Yeah, you were saying that was an accident.
Okay, very good. Anybody else here wish to speak in opposition of this application? You have come right up. Mr.
Yep,
Meisner,
one more,
we'll let you
Meisner.
sit back, and we'll call you when we're ready to have you come up and rebut, okay? But it's great exercise, right? And good evening.
Hi, I'm Mike and Julie Damiano. We are English Range Road, 57 English Range Road, right next door, on the other side of the lady before.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we've been living here since my family built this house in '94 and owned it since in the '80s. We have a great view of the area. It's a beautiful area. We asked the board to deny this variance to add a 3rd house. Right now, it's currently been a farm forever, as they mentioned. It's rated, low-density residential, and allowing 2 houses to be built there. Adding a 3rd house, or not allowing this variance into a low-density residential lot is not really creating an unnecessary hardship. It seems it's just going to be maximizing the value of the property. I looked at Realtor.com today, and 2+ acre houses are going for, in Derry, are going for like $700,000 to $800,000, which, good for some people, but, that's going to add that valuation to that property is over $1.5 million. allowing a third house is putting over $2 million at least. So I don't really see the unnecessary hardship, or not necessary hardship that is going to be occurred if you don't allow this variance. The other issue is there's nothing really unique about this property that would justify a frontage or a property width variation. I also, they're asking for a 175-foot frontage variation, but is there also a width variation, reduction as a width, property width variation they're asking for as well, because the width is less than 200 as well.
Mr. Mackey, do we have that correlation in this?
There, it's frontage and then the width at the 35-foot building setback.
Okay.
So it's actually 2 variations on the,
That's what we're wondering.
Okay.
Because the width, the frontage isn't there, but also I don't think the lot width is there either. So I'm not sure if that is that by definition inherited in this or not. But and this, the spirit, the spirit of the limitations to keep this area of English range zoned as low density is important to us. We've been living there, for quite a while. My family's owned there. It also goes against the spirit for no reason. I know you pointed to our lots next door that there's a little bit less than some of the frontage there. But if you notice those 3 houses next to that area, those are 7 acres each. So there's 3 houses on, 21 acres, whereas now they're proposing, instead of 2 houses in 10 acres, they want 3 houses in, 10 acres. So it's not really exactly the same. And this also, is another side thing. This goes against the spirit of the Derry Open Space Plan created in 2009 to try to keep some open spaces. That's why we live in a low density area, because we like the open spaces there. You want to add anything?
so again, I think in terms of the hardship piece, I don't see a demonstrated hardship with this application or a variance, and the variance has been in place, and you can speak to the date on that, when the actual zoning for the
Well, he said
frontage.
the late 80s, right? But
Yeah, so in terms of the property can be used in conformance with the ordinance as it stands, and so the variance is unnecessary, and that's what we would say. And for us, what if we were to sell our property, and then does everyone, kind of, full blown be able to have a variance now, so I could put 3 houses on my property?
and where does it end, I guess?
Yeah.
How much is too little for the frontage? Do we become all of a sudden medium density all of a sudden because we keep getting variances on the zoning?
So, the property is going to be overcrowded with 3 because we're making variances for it. So the intent of, conforming to the zoning is because that's the way it was set up. And the properties that are being pointed out, I would be interested to know whether it was pre the zoning or not when these properties were built. So, in terms of...
Could you say that again?
Sure. So the properties that are being pointed out, I think they were referred to as the blue properties on the design, when these homes were built and why they're out of ordinance. Were they basically part of the original predating, kind of what the frontage is required and the width? So,
Well, I do know that some of the properties off to that more westerly area were constructed during the general construction period, which is what Mr. Mackey, that timeline he's pointed out. It did become one of the issues to the town overall.
Yep.
And as Mr. Mackey has pointed out at my request, which was, it was a growth, to slow growth down, and overdevelopment under a general construction purpose versus having more stringent criteria that fits even for areas that would become non-conforming.
and the other thing that I think is a little bit concerning is the colonial nature of these builds, like not really understanding the structure of the property, like what they're going to look like, because in terms of, just overall property value, what these structures are going to actually be.
not sure I follow how your question is structured. I understand what you're saying about the type of house that's being put there, but I'm not sure what your relevance to this
Well,
is.
I would just be surprised, so he referred to a two-car garage. I would be surprised, based on the neighborhood and the conformance to kind of how those properties are laid out, that it would be kind of a smaller type unit, because most of our houses on that side that abut are very oversized properties with a three-car garage. So I would just be questioning, like, as far as the overall structure, like what it actually is going to be.
I think I can kind of defend that position, which is that, the rest of I can't speak for all the members of the board. They may want to see elevations and whatnot, but honestly, it starts to take us out of our basic purview. But when you're developing land or you're developing a parcel and you're putting a structure on it, one of the things that people point to are greedy developers, but a lot of times the amount of money that you're spending on a parcel, you have to justify that to a mortgage lender with the square footage of the home that you're putting on. So, in regards to what the average costs of homes are or what they're selling for, a lot of times the relevance is not just supply and demand, but it is also having to build a structure that a bank or a mortgage lender can justify the cost of the land by building a bigger home. I think that addresses kind of where you're going with this.
Yes, in a way.
They're not going to build a 1,500 square foot ranch on a $175,000 or $200,000 parcel.
Yeah.
And these plans that are shown here, these aren't finalized, right? They could change this any time after this process, right?
I think Mr. Meisner indicated that those are true and not concept,
Right.
with pins probably and locations that are solid.
But they still can be changed any time, right? It's not.
Well, I can't answer to that. Do you know an answer to that, Mr. Mackey? I can tell you this, that if it's an issue or a concern, this board has a purview of, if it grants this, to make sure that it's as presented
Okay,
and
that's what I was
not so elusive or arbitrary.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mackey, if you want to add to that.
No, I would say, obviously, you typically approve something as presented. Were there to be a significant change that wasn't in compliance, then they would have to come back to this board again to seek a different variance or whatever, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the one other question that I would just ask, and this may be part of the overall development, but he stated that there's no issues with seeing out of the driveways, and actually there are trees that come up the actual side of those stone areas, which do come way out, so it does impact negatively the property for us to be able to actually pull out of a driveway safely. So again, I don't know what kind of greenery or things are planned, but that's something to keep in mind, and especially if they're putting things closer to the road. That's problematic, pulling out of our driveway to the left right now.
The town's stipulation right now is 200 feet sight line each way, am I correct? Yeah.
Correct.
And the other relevance to your question would probably be gone through planning.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Before you guys go, I didn't catch your last name. It was Mike and Judy.
Mike and Julie Damiano, D-A-M-I-A-N-O.
Thank you.
Very good. Any questions? Ms. Tripp, you have a question for these folks?
Is the,
Hang on, folks.
Sorry.
Sorry.
well, actually, it was more a question for Bob.
Okay.
Since I believe all they're asking for is a variance on the frontage, do they have to ask for a variance on the width also?
Well, the section that was cited under
Oh, it's in the same section.
.b.2 includes, you have to have 175 feet and also for the lot, not 200 feet and also at the 35-foot setback. So the section that was cited would basically include.
Would cover both. All right, thank you.
Mr. Diesel, you all set?
I'm all set, Mr. Chair.
Good enough. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Anybody else out there, Mr. Provencher?
Seeing none rise, Mr.
Very
Chair.
good. Anybody else here in the room wish to speak in opposition? Sir?
Good afternoon. My name is Corey Dolliver. I'm the owner of 80 English Range Road. I'm a direct abutter to the next case and also across the street. So this one doesn't really affect me on the level as the next one, but I'll kind of voice my opinions and see what kind of comes with it. As far as the 3 lots go, I understand there's definitely reason to be able to put houses there. It's a large open field, and I don't see any reason why there shouldn't be able to be something put on it. As far as the 3 houses go, it does leave me a little bit concerned in the fact that it is great for building them. It's a large open field, but there isn't keeping in the nature of the street with a lot of trees and that make it kind of unique in each home, and giving that space to each individual owner of each property. So I think putting 3 homes on smaller than what's necessary would kind of create a large open, kind of dense packed area where I think 2 would be okay to have elbow room and some privacy. I think 3 would create, it would create a little subdivision that's just tucked in a little bit too tight and not really keeping with all the natural nature of the street. 2 houses, I think, is no problem. It's not up for me to say. It's buildable land. And I guess the only other thing is my driveway is directly across from, I would say, lot number 3 that's proposed on the furthest side.
More northerly?
I'm sorry?
More northerly?
Yes. And my mailbox is across the street, and I know just from getting my mail in the afternoon, there is a corner there, and I have to play Frogger with cars that go, so I don't know if this sight line is not enough for this first driveway. Because I can't see what's coming around the corner when I'm just at my mailbox, never mind another 100 feet up the road. It leaves a very, I think, dangerous blind spot where, if proposed, maybe we could, if we do get it passed, or if they do get it passed, just that it would be looked at for safety of really this first house and the occupants of it. I think it would create a lot of dangerous access to the driveway. I think that's it for that. I don't know if there's any questions beyond
Anybody
that.
have any questions? Oh, I think we're all set.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Mr. Donlin, you're out there, and I keep forgetting. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add or any questions, so.
Just taking it all in at this particular moment, Mr. Chair. I did have a question for Mr. Mackey.
Okay.
So prior to the change in the late 80s, this was if I understood correctly, you were saying it was kind of a general 1 acre, 125 type of situation in most of the town, if not all of the town?
Yes, prior to that change, at one time, pretty much all of your residential zone property in the town was zoned what was called general residential, which was 1 acre zoning with 125 feet of street frontage, which is, if you drive around Derry, you see smaller lots everywhere. Also, you could have a 2-family back in those days if you had, I think it was 1.5 acres. So, which is why if you drive around Derry, you'll see 2 families all over the place. Then again, as the chairman and I discussed back in the late 80s, with the explosive growth that was going on at the time, they took another look at the zoning, that they being the planning board. Any change to the zoning ordinance starts with the planning board, and they determined at that time that they needed to slow things down, so we now have, and that's remained in effect since that change was made back in the late 80s, where we now have what's called a medium-density residential, which is 1 acre zoning with 125 feet of frontage. We have low-medium density residential, which is 2 acre zoning with 150 feet, and then low density, which takes in most of East Derry and to the north of Derry and so forth. So that's obviously the 3 acres with 125 feet, 200 feet of frontage. So that's how that came to be.
Thank you for the clarifier on that. So if this was would have been developed in the during the, for lack of a better term, the boom of the 80s, when the farms were turning more into residential neighborhoods, as from what I understand, the vast majority of this neighborhood was built. It's fair to say that this would have been 4 or 5 lots, if not 3 or 4 two-family lots, had they wanted to maximize the properties, quote unquote, back then.
Well, back then, yeah. I mean, similarly, if you look at a lot plan of the town, you know, even under the LDR district, and you take a look around, well, you see a lot of lots that don't comply with those regs because, again, they were developed prior to the current 3-acre zoning. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. All right, anybody else here in the room wish to speak in opposition of this application? Very good. And no, we all set remotely there, Mr. Provencher?
One last.
Yep, one more time.
Mr. Chairman.
So as far as something that was said by one of the other abutters, they said that they had objected.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
They said they had objected to the planning board directly. Is that part of the process?
However, this board should vote on it. If this application does go to planning, then you have another opportunity to help on the structural matters and concerns of the development.
Or can I, you know, vote in objection to it to you or at this meeting?
I'm not sure I understand your
It wouldn't
question.
necessarily, it's a different purview. So after the zoning board, when a thing goes to the planning board, they'll be looking at kind of a different set of standards. So
Okay.
I would say personally, while I would hear it, what you would bring up likely wouldn't go into the way we vote on things.
Okay. I also think that the 2 proposed lots rather than 3 is just, you know, what is sustainable, so.
Okay.
And as far as the information from DES, the questions I asked about that, who should I turn to for answers?
Mr. Meisner has an opportunity to rebut, and you'll get your answers in a few minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for pinpointing some concerns for the board. I think everybody else is in the room is all set and no one remotely. So
Seeing no one rise, Mr. Chair.
all right, Mr. Meisner, this is your opportunity. In the next case, you get to do laps around the room.
On one foot.
So we have aquifers and wells, I think, is one of the top questions there.
Excuse me, I have a copy of the plan. So the answer to the question is DES has looked at the wells, the well locations, and that's part of their approval. So I'm going to just try to clip it up on the board.
Okay.
Keep 4 hands up, please.
Chair, do you want to add Ditzel's name to yours? It's missing.
Yeah.
So when we submit a plan to DES for their approval, they look at wastewater and groundwater for water supply. What we showed them, and on this plan, you can see down in the lower left-hand corner, that's the state approval, just so everyone knows that that's what that is. But we did show them well locations, and that's a protective radius there. And the state has determined that you need a certain protective radius for each well on each lot. And so we have one on each of them. And we've shown them potential septic locations for each of the homes up front. And additionally, there's soil tests that we did throughout the field, and there are some soil delineations on here. So when I said initially that this was all, I mean, we call it hard engineering. This is complete engineering. So we can guarantee you that the conditions that are on the site will not change from what we're showing you. A couple of, well, I guess, are there any questions with regards to that.
Well, so primarily the radius is your separation from your septic and not any guarantee to water volume or anything like that.
There are no guarantees for that at this point. But
And I knew that, but I was waiting to see if you had something new for me.
Yeah,
that
no.
I didn't know.
No. Well, are there any other questions on this, or I'll address some of the other abutter concerns?
I think I'm all set on the aquifers, but so unless anybody has any questions, they're free to come back with them at any time anyway. So please feel free to answer and rebut to the other concerns.
The additional, I jotted down most of the items that the abutters spoke about, and I would say, other than the fact where someone said that these were crowding the homes in here, all of the other issues will be handled at a planning board level. A couple of things that I can point out of interest, there is a double stone wall that runs down this side of the property, and those walls will be preserved. And if you recall in my presentation, I said that no stone walls will be disturbed in this application. So that's part of it, and I'm telling you that now, and you could stipulate that to the planning board, that you make sure that that's taken care of at that point. As far as crowding on these lots, these are all 3.5 acre lots, which is, it's more than the minimum, and the total site is just shy of 11 acres. So we have that much land out there, and these parcels were created some time ago. So we cannot create more frontage, but we do definitely have the required area that the town has put in their zoning. Additionally, Mr. Mackey had mentioned that in the medium density zone, the required frontage was 150. I realize we're not in the medium density zone, but I'm telling you that these at 175, this is more than that, and it's pretty close to what is asked for in this. So the building size, I think the chair did a good job at explaining what the houses would be like on that, because I probably would have said exactly those same words. The property itself, the cost and the value of the property sort of drives what you can build on it for a home. We envision these homes to be, and I said that when I addressed the criteria, I said that the homes would be of equal to or greater value than the homes in the surrounding properties, and we feel 100% confident that that will be the case. I don't think the other issues. Well, I did want to mention, and the reason that we have two applications in front of you this evening, and I'm going to take this plan off if everybody's all set with that.
We're not ready to introduce that other one yet. Just so you know, you can go ahead and speak to it as a reference if you'd like. Just didn't want you to start getting into it.
I don't want to stretch over that, but when the neighbors talked about density on this property, you can see that we have, what do we have, over 60 some odd acres out here. I'm trying to, in the high 60s on the acreage. And what we're proposing to the board is 4 new homes, 3 on this side of the street. And that is part of a greater global view of the Ball family property. And so, the 3 lots on this side of the road are easily supported by the amount of land that's there. The frontage is easily supported by that. When we talked about the lot width, when you take the minimum building setbacks and put the area that you could potentially have for a house in there is well over 100 feet, which is, that's a huge house. It's a ridiculously long house. So the sizes of the houses and the restrictions that you have, or that we have on the lots, as they stand here as 3 lots, we have plenty of room. It won't change the character of the neighborhood. The houses will be similar to what we see around the remaining portion of the neighborhood.
How do you look to handle the sightline issue? Not to get too far ahead, but I guess it's two questions, right? You're not going to disturb stone walls. Are there stone walls running along the frontage, and how do you attain the sightline?
On this side of the street, we have plenty of various spaces that we can put driveways out there, and I would always say, and my generic answer and generic rule is that we'll work with the safety officer for the locations of the driveways, and that's typical of our company and what we do. So before we go to the planning board, we'll prepare a cross-section and a driveway profile, show that to the safety officer or the TRC, and they would approve it. But I've been out there a number of times, and what you have to understand, I guess, or I'll say as a reflection, when you're out there, that barn is literally right at the right-of-way line, and the pavement is extremely close to that. So once the barn is removed, that's going to open up a lot of area, and the sight distances going either way will improve dramatically at that point.
Yeah, just a note, I mean, these aren't concept drawings of the surveys or the lots, but the houses' locations are, correct? The locations of the structures.
The locations of the structures are just a concept, so to speak. They could be moved,
Accordingly.
They could be moved anywhere. We show the building setback lines, which are here, along that line, up in the back, along the property line. So in that square right there, or the rectangle, a home could be built anywhere in there.
Now, you had indicated that the lots had been there for a while, or that's what you said, and I just want to make sure that I understand. The lots, as you've subdivided them, have not been there for a long time, but the mass of land has.
Yes. Yes.
Wrong?
Yeah, no, I don't, if I said that, this is a new proposal for a new subdivision.
Got it.
The tract of land runs along the perimeter like this.
Yeah. Got it.
And we're proposing to cut that out.
I understand. Okay. Very good. Anybody else have any questions, rebut, anything?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Corbett.
So one of the questions that came up, Mr. Miser, was in regards to the lot widths and whether or not that was attainable. And this may be a combo question for you and Mr. Mackey. Looking at the section, it says that the minimum lot width is 200 feet at the 35-foot front setback line. And looking at the drawings and just doing rough math off of the scale, I'm showing roughly 100 feet, 75 feet, and 75 feet for the properties. So I guess my questions are, 1, am I interpreting this correctly? 2, is that math roughly correct? And 3, how are we handling that, as that would be another variance?
So I'm not sure I'm clear there. It's at 35 feet back.
It has to be 200 feet wide.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes. I think Mr. Mackey, I don't see the phrasing of the questions here. Mr. Mackey, you want to touch on that again, please? The phrasing
Well, I
of-
think in the motion, well, if you look at the request here, what I put on the staff report, 3 residential lots with each lot having less than the required frontage and lot width.
Got it.
So it's covered.
So it is for both items?
Yeah.
Okay.
You good there?
I'm good. I guess, something to keep in mind is I feel the whole conversation to the point has been to the frontage, that we do also have a width concern as well.
Yeah, and it's, but it is addressed one and all on the structure.
Correct. Just, for me, it's the request.
Got it, okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right, very good. If there's no other questions or comments, I think we are at a point where we can go into deliberation on this. If somebody wishes to take us down that road.
I make a motion to go into deliberation.
Mr. Dietzel has that motion.
Mr. Burgess, the second.
I'll second
Mr.
it.
Burgess seconded that motion. All in favor of going into deliberation, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Anybody wish to lead off with some commentary?
Nope.
It's a nice plan, very well detailed. Personally, I do share the concerns of a couple of the abutters that were brought up, primarily the 3 lots. You know, I think more so for me, it's the 3 lots and how much of a request that is. Rather than one property coming in with a variance, we're now looking at 3 properties that each, you know, that have 2 aspects that require the variance. And that does just seem to me a lot to go from one property that's conforming to 3 that are completely out of conformity.
Okay. Mr. Dietzel, you have anything?
I had the exact same concern as Mr. Corbett. I think 2 structures would be conforming with the ordinance, the spirit of the ordinance. I do have trouble with 3, and I do have concern about the drilling of the wells. One of the abutters brought up the fact that we've been in a drought, and I don't think that was really well fleshed out by the applicant. And those are my concerns for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ver, you have any comments here? No. None? Mr. Burgess?
The well situation, I think, is more the purview of the zoning board than us. So we don't have much to say about that.
Planning board.
Planning board, I'm sorry. Sometimes the brain doesn't work. I was concerned originally about the 3, but we've allowed things 25 feet on each one of these is not the worst thing we've ever had to do for a piece of property. I don't see it as squeezing when you get 175 feet. When you put a house in there, you know, we only have 15 foot on either side that you need clearance. So there's, what is it, 135 feet that you could build in? So that's not really squeezing things up much.
What was the 15-foot comment, Mr. Burgess?
175 minus 30.
No, what were you saying with the 15?
15 feet on each side for...
So that was one that kind of jumped out at me on lot 1, because if you look at that,
Yes.
with where this house is at the side, I've got it at roughly 12 and a half feet. So where the house at lot 1 is,
Yes.
it's not quite 15 feet from the property line either.
Okay.
I'm not following that conversation.
If you're saying, you know, the 15-foot setback, you know, for the property line from the house, just looking at the proposal for lot 1, you know, just another one for me, it doesn't quite look like it meets 15 feet.
Are you basing this on the idea that it's a 100-foot home?
Basing this off of the footprint and the scale.
The home that they're proposing.
Yeah.
So the homes that they're proposing are concept and they're not to scale.
Right.
I think that in order, if the applicant wanted to go outside of those setbacks, they would have to come back here for another variance for that individual lot.
Well, I guess, so they didn't do maybe a better job of articulating. As we were saying before, you know, this is, as presented is really what they're going to be moving towards, and that was kind of what we could say to hold them. But as presented is a 12 and a half foot setback rather than the 15. So while it is conceptual, it's, you know, are we still going to ignore that?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Mackey.
I know you're in deliberative, but so the board has clarity. I'm not quite following where Craig is seeing the 12, because if you look at this plan, in the dotted lines that go around the perimeter of the property, that is the setback.
Yeah.
The required building setback. So the house on that lot is clearly shown outside of that setback, so in compliance with the setback.
Yeah.
Perfect. That was just where I was stuck. Just where I was
Just
looking at.
want
Thank you.
there to be some confusion.
That's basically, that's all I was saying, was that there's plenty of room to build in there, plus space to the side. I mean, it's not really technically crowding to me. So, no, I really don't have too much
Objection here?
objection on this.
Yeah, I'm looking at this, and as I'm listening to butters, and I'm hearing we're having this discussion back and forth about the discrepancy of how many homes, it's sporadic, right? The lot sizes are kind of sporadic for a lot of the way, and if you add this property in, before it's subdivided, it emphasizes that point. This property parcel being subdivided starts to average out more of the properties in a consistent area. And this board, as Mr. Ver early on taught me when we were working together, is a relief valve where stringents are maybe unfavorable to a relief or property owner. In the argument of the frontage and the comfort of whether or not these parcels, the comfort range, because the width is a little too narrow, but when you see the size of the lot and the depth of it, that argument likewise, I'm not making sense here. I'm not going where my mind
I know where you're going with this.
I mean, we're not asking the applicant to give back the overage of the 3 acres either. This is an averaging of the lots with specificity to the goal that the planning board had for a specific purpose. Some of these properties and parcels were developed prior to that, but some of them are obviously being developed after that. But without the stipulation of the 200-foot frontage, you don't have a guide for the area that, and hence the applicant comes back for relief. Sometimes we get into how the ownership of the property, the historic ownership of the property is, and what could be done with it. Is someone coming before us and claiming that they didn't know any better and it was an oops, and so therefore they're looking for relief, but they just purchased the property. But the historic information on this parcel is that the Ball family owned this for a lot of years, and it was the Balls' intent to keep the barn, perhaps as a memorial, and keep that rural effect. It is the Balls that are the extension of Mr. and Mrs. Ball that is bringing this before us. But when you look at the total, all the parcels down the road, there's that averaging fact that you have to go, I think is fair to do here. And I think that goes to Mr. Burgess's point. I'd like to go back for just a minute. I've got to direct back to Mr. Dietzel and his concerns about the wells. He indicated that had not been fleshed out adequately. Could you clarify your meaning on that, Mr. Dietzel?
Well, some of the abutters said that they had wells and they were concerned about the drought, and that 3 more wells being drilled would affect their ability to draw water from the reservoir or the groundwater.
Okay. And are you?
But Mr. Burgess pointed out that might be more for planning.
Okay. Well, and is your concern there the effect on other wells? Is that the concern?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
I just feel, maybe 2 2 structures would be more appropriate. 3 might be a drain. I don't know if that's been examined by anybody.
Well, I think one of the concerns when you get into wells, right, is that, and it's often what we have heard when new developments go in, could be 2 or 5 or 1 home, you never know. And that water issue is not taken lightly, but it just needs clarification on the part of the deciders on this case. But do you hold up, the question is, do you hold up any development on the risk that somebody's going to drill a well and it's going to one well, and on the risk that it could dry up other people's wells? And whether
Well, that's a fair question that we have to think about and make a decision on. That's a fair, I can make the argument both ways. It's just a question I had.
Okay, very good. Anybody else have any concerns, or you wish to vet? All right, well, let's go to the structure of the motion. Mr. Corbett.
Back to the concern, it's just a concern, it's just more something I'm wrestling with, to the point of the width, where I'm hung up in thoughts of the 3 versus the 2, kind of the point where you were, I think where you're getting towards it, even combining down to 2, I still don't necessarily see the width. And I think, we still have the frontage issue, so I also don't know how big of a difference 2 to 3 is in that regard as well. So just kind of want to go back and try to complete my ramble.
Okay, very good. Let's look at structuring a motion, if we could. We have subject to obtaining all state town permits and inspections. There's something, cisterns, correct, Mr. Mackey? That's cisterns are going to fall under those inspections, permits, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the TRC and planning board review that would be covered.
Very good, and we'll make that subject, that second condition on this motion, subject to the TRC review and planning board approval as well. I think we talked about stone walls. Does anybody else have any other concerns or any structure motions they'd like to add, any points they'd like to add to the motion?
I mean, is the stone wall also a state law that it couldn't be removed? Is that something we would even have to mention in there? I believe we hear that from Mr. Peliquin a lot when he's here.
So say again?
The stone walls, or it's the difference between the stone wall and the rock wall, it can't even be taken down?
No,
I feel like Mr. Peliquin tells us that every time he presents. I know he's not here to speak to that, and I couldn't have it confused.
Isn't there something about that?
Mr. Mack, is that part of it with the stone wall? You can't take it down. Isn't that like a state law or something?
Not necessarily. It would depend on, again, on your property. Not here, we're dealing with a scenic road. So there are some rules with regard to that as far as cutting, like if the town has to go out and do maintenance and cut trees down in the right-of-way, then they have to have a hearing and so forth. So were this to be approved and it goes to the planning board, I guess that would have to be fleshed out exactly what would be happening with the walls. I guess the applicant had said they did, on this side of the road anyway, didn't think that they would be interrupting any of the walls, but certainly something that would have to be looked at.
Yeah, it takes us back, right? If you start looking at the width requirements that we have on driveways, so if the driveway is going to be 150 feet, it's going to be an 18-foot cut, correct?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah, and that applies. It's not like we leave the stone wall 12 feet and then we widen the driveway around it, correct?
That's correct, Bill. Sure, the fire department will insist on a wider cut.
All right.
But the testimony of the gentleman up here said that they would not be disturbing any of the stone walls.
Yeah.
That's, so they're not planning on doing it in the first place, so I don't...
Well, you've got to do it in order to get a driveway in.
Yeah, it's true enough.
That's the
But
max.
as I recall, there's no stone walls in the front. It's kind of like on the sides, sort of, in the property.
All right, well, you could make a condition that stone walls have limited disturbance if you felt the need. I'll leave that up to anybody else if they wish to add that as a condition. So.
I'd like to add that as a condition.
Minimal disturbance to the stone.
Minimal disturbance to the stone walls.
All right, so let's make it more specific, which is stone wall alteration only at driveway widths. That work for you?
Yes.
Okay. You have that, Mrs. Moran?
Yes.
It's driveway entrance only, correct? Is that what you have?
I have stone wall alterations only at driveway.
Openings. Okay, good enough, that works.
for me.
Yep. Okay, anything else? Seeing nothing, okay, very good. Let's,
I move to get out of deliberative sessions.
very good, thank you, Mr. Burgess. And Mr. Dietzel, you want to help out
Oh,
there?
prior to that, do we need to discuss the finding of fact, Mr. Chair?
Sorry again?
Prior to coming out of deliberative, do we want to go over the findings of fact, or do we do that outside? Forgive me for kind of forgetting that order.
Yeah, no, we'll, no, we can tap into that right now if you'd like. I started covering it once we get the, prior to the vote.
That's fine for me. I just want to make sure I just couldn't remember how it had been going.
Okay, all right.
Don't have the muscle memory yet.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. Mr. Dietzel, you want to help us on that second?
I'll second the motion to come out of deliberative.
All right, all in favor of coming out of deliberation, say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Hearing none. Mrs. Moran, you have a motion to read.
I do, thank you.
Your mic on?
Your phone?
Is your button on?
Yeah.
You got that, Mr. Preventer?
I make a motion on case number 23-101, Kurt Meisner, Meisner Brem Corporation, owner, Donald F. Ball, Irrevocable Trust, Douglas Ball trustee, to grant a variance to the terms of Article 6, Section 165-48.b.2 and 3 of the Town of Derry zoning ordinance to allow the property to be subdivided into 3 residential lots, with each lot having less than the required frontage and lot width. Proposed frontages are 175 feet, 175 feet, and 175.86 feet, where 200 feet is required at 53 English Range Road, parcel ID 11090, zoned LDR, as presented with the following conditions. We have 3. 1, subject to obtaining all state and town permits and inspections. 2, subject to TRC review and planning board approval. 3, stone wall alterations only at the driveway openings. And that concludes the reading of a motion. I need a second.
I'll second.
Mr. Corbett has a second on that. As the motion is on the floor, any last changes, alterations, or amendments? Seeing none, no gestures there. All in favor of moving that for vote, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Prior to the vote, we have finding of fact for case 23-101. The application is to subdivide a 10-acre parcel into 3 residential lots. The zoning district is low-density residential. The requirements of the zoning district are 3 acres with 200 feet of frontage and 200 feet at the 35-foot setback. An existing barn on the property will have to be raised to accommodate this request, this application. Are there any other conditions to add for the finding of fact? Hearing no yes.
Sorry, do we need to listen at all on the lot width? Since we put on the requirements of the zoning district, the 3 acres, 200 feet of frontage, do we need to expand to the?
I read that.
To the 200 feet of the 35-foot line?
I read that.
I didn't hear that part, sorry.
All right, good enough. Anybody have any objections to that? Hearing no gestures, we've moved this for a vote, so let me poll the board. Mr. Corbett,
Come back to me, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ver,
Yes.
Mr. Burgess,
Yes.
Mr. Dietzel,
Yes.
Mr. Corbett.
Oh, yes.
Very good. I hear a hesitation there. You care to elaborate?
I just have a tough time with it. As I kind of mentioned, I'm wrestling between the 2 to the 3 as far as if I feel it's too much. However, with the 2 versus the 3, the numbers also are still out. I do feel then the two I feel alter the character of the neighborhood a little bit more. Looking at the properties, they'd start to be wider than everything in the area. Understanding the spirit of the ordinance, that does fit more so, but I do feel the 3 matches better. So I'm just completely on the fence on this one. But I think I'm okay with an yes.
Very good. All right, the chair will make it unanimous on this one application here. So congratulations, Mr. Meisner, to you and your applicant.
Thank you.
This application has been approved by unanimous decision of 5-0. Anybody aggrieved by this decision has 30 days to ask this board for a rehearing on the merits. After that, recourse would be to Superior Court. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a small break?
We can recess for about 3 minutes, okay, Mr. Provencher?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
30 minutes.
Heard it.
Go ahead.
Back to work again.
Folks, sit down. Thank you. All right, let's proceed with the next case, 23-102, which is Kurt Meisner again, and the Meisner-Brem Corporation representing Donald F. Ball Irrevocable Trust, Douglas Ball trustee. Mr. Meisner, you are the attendee for the applicant, so feel free to proceed as our protocols are the same as the prior case.
Certainly. Good evening again.
Let me hold you right there again.
I'm going to step down on this case as well, Chair, for an alternate.
Very good. Mr. Tripp, would you sit for this, please?
I'd be happy to.
Very good. Mr. Meisner, sorry to take you off.
Okay. Good evening again, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Kurt Meisner. I'm with Meisner-Brem Corporation. I'm the engineer for the project this evening. In the audience, additionally, is Darren and Douglas Ball, members of the Ball family, and Gretchen Meisner, who is also a member of the Ball family. Would you like me to read the proposal in the record first? The last time we didn't. I went right to the criteria. But
Yeah, we typically like to do the criteria first, and I know every board does it differently. We look at it as a sworn testimony, and it's essentially like a charge on a traffic ticket. Go ahead.
I don't get many of those.
Well, you don't go into court to see the judge without a charge, right? So
Exactly.
there it is.
Okay, the variance is not contrary to the public interest because granting the variance would not impact the character of the neighborhood. The existing house lot does have a new NHDES approved septic design. The second house lot septic will assure that there's no threat to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighbors. And the 42 acres of land in the back will not be built upon. The proposed driveway has excellent visibility, and the subdivision has been approved by NHDES. The spirit of the ordinance is observed because the enacted frontage requirement is to provide adequate spacing between dwellings. Both proposed residential lots are 3 acres or more in size, providing adequate room for spacing between dwellings. Lot 1A has 5 acres. And the house would be placed over 250 feet from the road, protecting the current view along the road. And no existing stone walls will be disturbed in this proposal. Substantial justice is done because the lots have conforming area and more. The denial of the variance is not any apparent gain to the public. On the contrary, if approved, a large area of the property which abuts additional conservation land would not be built upon. This would permit the land to be used to its most useful potential. The values of the surrounding properties are not diminished because the proposed use is allowed in the LDR district, and it mimics the nearby properties in size and appearance. The future dwelling will be of equal to or greater value than the surrounding properties, and Lot 2A has greater than the required area, and the new dwelling on Lot 1A will be set back over 250 feet from the roadway. The literal enforcement of the provision of this ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship because the denial of the variance does not result in any gain to the public. Now, the proposed subdivision has NHDES approval. The existing house has a new approved septic system design which will be installed. The second residential house will have a state-approved septic system installed also. This variance, if approved, will help guarantee additional conservation land for the residents of the town of Derry. The proposed use is a reasonable one because the proposed lots will be for residential and conservation use, which are the same as the adjacent lots. The proposed lots meet all other zoning setback requirements, and the 42 acres of land abuts additional or existing conservation land in the town of Derry. So that being the 5 criteria, I will describe in words what we're trying to do here. So we have, this is 51 acres of land on the west side of English Range Road. That's the perimeter of the property here. There's the existing farmhouse is located here, and that has a, as I stated, it has a new septic system design approved for it, and that would be constructed as a part of this proposal. There is an existing well on this lot that is located on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side of the property, excuse me, over here. We're creating a new lot that we're asking for a frontage variance on here to go down to 72 feet. That request coming from the fact that there is there's a very large maple tree out here. It's a beautiful tree in good condition, and as was stated before, this is a scenic road, and we're trying to keep that tree. We're not trying to keep that tree, we're going to keep that tree as a part of this proposal. Just beyond that, there's a, I'll call it a curb cut, but it's a driveway that the Balls use to enter the property out in the back of it, additionally out to the back land that's up in here. We're proposing to build a single-family home on this lot here, and we did make that lot 5 acres in size, which is 2 acres larger than the minimum requirement in this area. So the section of land to the rear of the property, which I'm highlighting here, has no frontage on English Range Road. We have provided an access over an easement from the street to come to the back. We have had some interest and a great amount of discussion with conservation agencies for the piece of land in the back. And those agents have requested that they had access through here. And additionally, there is an opportunity, because the land over here is also on conservation land, that they could access through here. So their access points to this land could come from the connection of this to the next parcel, and or if someone wished to drive up there, they could come up off of here. That land is not intended at this point, right here, right now, today, to be, I'll call it for public land. What the agents that acquire that land, they may be able to do, they will specify what they would like to do on that piece of land. And I'm just going to flip my board so we can look at the general neighborhood. So as we look at the tax map, the red outline here is the conservation lot. This one here is the single-family home, and this one here is the Ball Farm residence. So what we're doing here is we're trying to make an effort for the farmhouse to stay where it is. And one of the issues, and I will tell you, and one of the Balls mentioned it to me before during the break, that it was the Ball family's wish to keep this land in its natural state, in conservation land, and to protect it. Like many farm owners and landowners, they wanted to protect it. So what we're doing here is we're creating a vehicle to protect that 41 acres in the back of the property. The Balls have their home here, and we have a house lot that we're preparing here to make it feasible to do this project. The new lot would be, it would be serviced by an on-site septic system and and an on-site well. As I stated earlier in my presentation, that has been approved by the state of New Hampshire, and so that's in place. So we know that everything that we're proposing to do here is approvable should we continue forward. The state of New Hampshire has already approved it. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation for the time being and answer any questions that you have.
Mr. Tripp, anybody? Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burry, all set?
Yeah. What's the width where the house is proposed?
Okay, that is a slightly loaded question. Where the house is proposed?
Correct.
Well, that width would be anywhere from, let's say, about 250 feet to potentially 700 feet if we slide the house back. And I would say the representation that we have on this plan here, again, the same as the last proposal is,
It's roughly,
it's just a generic,
approximately, as we say.
yeah, on this 5-acre site, it's vast for a location of a home out there. So we can place that, and I would expect and suspect that maybe during planning board approval, they might have something to say about that.
That right away, excuse me, is that just going to be a path, or is it going to be paved? Or?
Well, a portion of it might be paved to go to the new house, but then the remaining portion would be, I'll call it a path. That's a good term for that.
Okay.
I mean, I see this encouragement of conservation, and I see this access point, as Mr. Burgess was just touching on. I'm curious about the forecasting of it, of its conservation land. It draws folks in. It's usually the intent of it. Just kind of an offside thought, where do vehicles park and where do people walk to get up there?
Well, there is 41 acres of land there. Let's start with that. But these parcels over here are under the control of the Derry Conservation Commission.
Very good.
And, they have access there. So this is sort of adding a bedroom to a house, if you follow me. There's access through both sides.
Kind of an ancillary passage?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, Mr. Burgess, you all set?
Yeah, I think I am.
Anybody else? Mr. Tripp?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So this is going to be a easement, which means that it doesn't necessarily have to be anything other than a right to cross over by the conservation people, right?
Correct.
Are you going to make it cross over by the public also when you give the easement?
Well, did you ask if you're required to?
No, the thing is, if this property becomes recreational conservation land, then people are going to have a way to get there. Now, I understand that there's, somewhere on the other side, there's conservation land, and that people could gain access that way. But if you're granting an easement, you must have some intent.
Correct. So what I would say, and what I'm privileged to say at this point, I'm not privileged to go beyond what I've discussed with the, and I'll say conservation agencies, is that it's not intended right now for public use for everybody in the town of Derry. That's my understanding. But I do know that there are areas to this side here, where there are some, I'll call them farmers, that utilize those pieces of land. They rent out acreage, and they, plant their crops, and that's how, that's what they do. So I am not privy right now to what Conservation's intent is for this piece of land.
So presently, the farmers who rent the land out have access to that.
They do, and it's pretty much, well, from on
I can't see where you're pointing because you're in the way.
Oh, I'm sorry. Now you can't hear me. On those parcels there, I'll try to duck my head. On those parcels there, they have access from English Range Road.
Could you shine up
There
on
we
the big screen instead of the little one?
Okay, there we go. So on these parcels here, they have access from English Range Road. There's a large portion of this parcel here currently that is farmed right in there. And that access, those people come in from down here and they cross over to that spot and go up there. So it's a natural progression of what's being utilized and used right now.
Okay, so it's to be determined as to what the easement will be used for, and that's fine.
Correct.
Who owns the property at lot 1180, it looks like 86?
88?
Which is adjacent to the multifaceted lot.
It's in a butter that's in the audience.
1188?
I was asking him.
Yeah,
So you don't,
I'm going to assume that it's the parcel. I didn't hear the number that you said, but I'm going to assume that it's the gentleman that said so. Did you say 1186?
Well, it looks like that. Next time I'll bring my magnifying glass.
It's pretty small.
So the reason I asked that is I didn't know whether you had the ability to utilize that land to make the frontage for the second lot more than 72 feet.
Oh, no. The gentleman's home is on that property right now, and his home is...
But that's okay. No is an acceptable answer.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so let's see. So the only easements the only variances you're asking for is the zero frontage for the large lot?
And the frontage on the other two lots that we created.
I was going to proceed once you answered yes.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
All right, and then there's the 175-foot frontage on the second lot and the 72-foot frontage on the third.
Correct.
So those are the only three variances you're asking for, other than width also.
Correct.
All right. So, all right.
All set, Mr. Tripp?
I've run out of questions for now.
Okay, good enough. Anybody else?
No.
How is it, I see a lot of boundary on the stone wall on the, around the whole 40, 50 acres. Was that part of the decision on the smaller, the 5-acre lot, which would be lot 1A? Is that I guess I'm trying to get at what's the dividing line? How did that come about?
Well, you mean for the frontage or for the line that separates 1A and the farmhouse?
Just the boundary overall around the whole 1A lot? So even the back line?
So a portion of that is a stone wall, a portion of it, not the entirety. So the portion that comes up, zigs over to the left and then goes back is not a stone wall.
Okay. All right. All right, Mr. Mackey, you have anything you want to share with us?
Just again, low-density residential, so the same parameters apply as the last case. I think you all did see an email that was sent by Conservation Chair, who was just saying that they are in negotiations, I guess, with regard to that piece that's proposed, the 41 acres in the back. That's it.
Okay, good enough. Thank you.
I have another question.
Mr. Tripp?
The negotiations that you're having with Conservation, now, is this where you're going to grant them an easement of the property in total, the 42 acres?
They, at this point, would actually take ownership or possession of that. That's why I said to you that I'm not, what they do with it in the future would be up to them.
Yeah, because once you give it to them, this is gratis. The balls are giving it to them gratis.
Could be a what?
They're giving the property to Conservation at no cost?
Correct.
So, all right. But there's nothing concrete has come about yet.
Well, I would say it may not be concrete, but it's mortar and it's sand and it's water and we're mixing it. They have seen these plans, and this is, these are prepared with some input from them also.
All right, well, thank you.
I would just clarify, it's not giving, it's selling to Conservation or the town.
It's being at a price.
Yes.
Has,
We're going to sacrifice 1 or 2 zoning board members in trade for.
So the Conservation is providing some of the cash to purchase this. I imagine that the Eastern...
Yeah, probably, but I'm not privy to any of those discussions, so.
No, and hopefully the town is not providing any of the money.
We don't know that.
Well, there's a lot of...
All right, well, let's move on with the points of the case. Your indication, Mr. Meisner, was that the Balls had the intent of leaving some of this land as conservation or open and essentially undeveloped. Am I correct?
Well, I didn't say that that was their intention, but it was their desire.
I see. Okay.
And this plan facilitates that. And that's one of the reasons we're in asking for the variance that we are, so we can facilitate the, the 41 acres in the back, and the Balls can keep their house out in the front, which is the old farmhouse, and that's part of it.
Okay, very good. If there's nothing else from anyone, I'd like to move on with public input. Everybody else set? No, okay. We have some, I'm sorry? Mr. Donlin, you have anything there?
I'm all set right now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. So that being said, we'll make a call to public. Mr. Provencher, we have some phone numbers, and Mr. Corbett will narrate to them.
So anybody at home who wishes to dial in, please dial 646-558-8656. Your meeting ID is 323-909-140. Press star 9 to raise your hand. If you're having any technical issues, please dial 603-845-5585, and someone will help you.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody here wish to come up and speak to this that are in the room currently that's in favor? Seeing no one rise. Anybody out there, Mr. Provencher?
Seeing no one rise.
All right, well, we'll leave some residual time in case there's anybody late coming into this remotely. So at this point, anybody in opposition to this application, this would be your opportunity to come up and have your voice heard on the matter. Anybody wish to come forward? Yes, sir.
Chair, we did have a hand raised online again.
Okay. Let's let that, is that for,
This is a Mr. Will Lowenthal.
okay, Mr. Lowenthal.
We'll bring him onto the dais, if you will, and
Welcome, Mr. Lowenthal.
be here momentarily. Switching over now. And we'll ask him to unmute.
Yes, thank you to the zoning board for allowing me to speak. My name is Will Lowenthal. I live at 76 English Range Road, which is parcel number 11-85-1 on your plan in front of you. I am a direct abutter to this property. In full disclosure, I am a member of the Dairy Conservation Commission, and I have recused myself from any discussions or negotiation about this parcel. So I'm speaking strictly for myself as the neighboring property. I will say, though, that a lot of this information that Mr. Tripp was looking for has been discussed at the most recent town council meeting, and you might find it useful to review that. In any event, I am not speaking for the Conservation Commission on the remarks I have to make subsequently. This is speaking strictly for me. I am neither opposed nor against the Lot 1A. I just want to call attention to a couple of things. For one, unlike the property you reviewed previously, which is a hayfield, this Lot 1A is a heavily wooded lot with very mature trees. The stone wall that you see on bordering my property, 1185.1, actually this plan does not show that the wall tees off, and from the left it goes out to English Range Road. To the right it extends very far into the two Lot 1A and Lot 2A. So this wall bisects the sort of strange shape of this Lot 1A and cuts it off. So I would ask, first of all, that no disturbance of that wall be done, because it is a historic wall. I would also like to ask that because of the wooded nature and because of the privacy it affords, that no tree cutting be done along the stone wall, and actually within that 35-foot setback that you see separating our two properties. I would request that no tree cutting or brush clearing or anything like that be done. And that is really all I have to add to this conversation here.
You follow the stone wall area he's referring to?
No.
Mr. Lowenthal, could you be briefer and more succinct on the stone wall aspects you were talking about?
Well, if you look at if Mr. Meisner could display the map for you.
Well,
again.
he's not in his seat right now. So,
all right. Do you have plans in front of you? I mean, I'm trying to
yes, we do.
Okay, if you look at lot number, or the lot to the left of Lot 1A, the proposed Lot 1A,
yep,
you will see a stone wall which runs all along the backside of my property.
I see, okay.
And that wall where it ends on your map there is actually a T. So the wall tees off, and some of it goes to the left all the way down to English Range Road, and a very large portion goes to the right through 1A and 2A.
Okay.
So that bisects the proposed lot here. Yep. And my request is that that wall, which is historic, stay intact. And also, as I mentioned, the tree cutting, you can see the setback line along the property on the map, that is, along the border between my lot and Lot 1A. And I request that there be no tree cutting within the setback.
All right, very good. The board will
Thank you.
consider your discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. So we'll bring you up now. Anybody else out there, by the way, Mr. Preventer?
Checking now, Mr. Chair.
You're all set. Come on up. And we'll need your name again, okay?
My name's Corey Dolver, owner of 80 English Range Road, direct abutter. This is my fiance.
Jenna McNamara.
So this one is definitely a little bit more hard for us to kind of digest and see what the end goal is for this. And, you know, we're speaking of kind of saving and keeping in with the appeal of the neighborhood. If you can see on the maps, unfortunately, it doesn't look like anywhere they really give you a visual in their plans of just how close my home is to all of these things that they're proposing and lot lines and the open areas that they would like to put this proposed house.
And again, you're 11-86.
Yes, sir. Yep. That house would be directly behind mine. That elevation between my home and where that house would go would be, in building terms, almost one level of a, you know, residential lot. That puts any proposed home being well and easily visible from the road, making me have, well, you know, a very large home, completely overcasting mine and visible from the street. Not only that, but this leaves my house with no privacy. It leaves my space, my family, no room to enjoy themselves.
How far off the road is your house?
My house is, I believe it's right in the middle of the lot. I think there is just under 100 feet from my furthest point of the back of my house to this lot line. But it's all open space. There are 2 decently tall trees, but it's one big open field, and it's always kind of been utilized as that. This is something that I just can't see the benefit outweighing the issue that it would cause on my family. I don't want to, we have 3 small boys, and my wife, we come home and we want to have peace in our backyard, and to have a driveway and a large house overshadowing us, and, you know, who knows what kind of neighbors you can get. You can get great neighbors, but no one wants them in your backyard all the time. It just leaves us not knowing what we do for our future, and it's really scary because we've put a lot into getting both of our lives combined into this home and trying to make it our dream home. And with someone's having a house that close and overshadowing and in such a small area, it's just not, the benefits aren't weighing.
So it looks like the proposed house is probably about 200 feet behind yours.
That's not correct.
Well, because you had indicated, I think Mr. Corbett supported that with the vision support map, which shows your house about halfway up that side lot line.
Yes.
That side lot line's about 200 feet, and it looks like it's about, so if you're right in the middle of that 200 feet, 200 divided by in half is 100. It looks like there's an equal distance from your lot line back to this proposed house, so that's another 100 feet.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that this is only proposed, so I think we should say we're really kind of dealing with small, margin of what could be moved back or forward. It just leaves me to the value of my house will easily be, lost, and there's no tangible amount to it. But I know if I went to look at my house and there was a large home that has to make up for this land that was explained, we're talking large colonials and whatnot that already would stand at ground level 1 story above mine. We're going to have quite a view from just the road.
All right, so 300 feet back is where it looks like this house is being proposed.
Correct.
300 feet back is comfortable? Yes or no?
I'm sorry, comfortable?
300 feet back from the road. Is that comfortable? So it's being proposed at 300 feet. It's a concept, but is that far enough back for you?
It isn't, and I think that
Understand this board doesn't necessarily have that purview to make that decision, but I'm just
no,
trying
understandably.
to, simplify it for you.
I'm just trying to find out if it's within keeping of, kind of this road.
Okay.
There's going to be a very large house. There's no frontage there. 75 feet isn't a lot to just add a driveway in. You're adding vehicles coming and going, and then we don't know what this easement is going to be used for. What kind of traffic is that going to create?
Now you're talking about something different. A minute ago, you were talking about how far back this new proposed house is behind your house, and now you're talking about an easement that's on the other side. One of the things that's under this board's guide is simply the questions of area and frontage. It's not where a house gets placed. If your concern is overcrowding, which I'm hearing, I'm trying to kind of rationalize that and understand where you're at with it.
I think that's fair, and I apologize. I don't know how to really explain the situation.
Okay.
It is overcrowding. The lot that's there is very natural looking.
It's wooded?
Say again?
Wooded?
Not wooded.
Mr. Lowenthal had indicated it was wooded?
The area that he is speaking of is wooded.
All right.
In zooming in, you can see where the proposed location would be for the house, and it is open.
I see.
It's completely, it's just about cleared besides for 2 trees.
Okay. All right, anything else?
I think besides for the fact that it's going to have an issue on, the value of my home.
Okay.
And the proximity to it is a problem.
You're concerned about property value?
It's not property value, it's
like quality of
It's
life.
quality of life. That has a value to it. It's not I'm not speaking on monetary value.
Okay.
It's quality of life and proximity and squeezing people into a location that just seems unnatural to try to make things work.
Okay. I mean, no doubt, and most people go through this when there's a development coming up behind them, they're kind of taken back by it. There's always that concern of, well, I'm so used to the woods, or I'm so used to that privacy, and all of a sudden you feel infringed upon. Am I correct?
I think that is a very
That's how you feel?
It is a good statement to make, but there's no privacy. So I would like to try to work with him at some point if it's willing, and we can come up with a plan, but it's hard.
Should this prevail through this board, it goes to planning, and there'll be an opportunity for you to speak to it there, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else?
No.
All right, very good. Thank you. Anyone else? Anybody out there, Mr. Preventure?
We'll check one last time, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Seeing no one rise.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, everybody. David Rugh, R-U-G-H, 84 English Range. That's my house with the white type driveway coming up. So I bought the Balls land all the way back.
Yeah.
A couple things. First of all, there's a lot of skepticism by me on this conservation thing. Seems like Mr. Meisner beat around the bush a lot, like no answers of what it's going to be used for. But let's get back to Corey. I forget your last name, Corey? Dolliver. This flag lot that you're intending to do, you're taking one lot, the Balls land, who I've lived beside for 38 years, been great neighbors. It's a conforming lot, acreage, frontage. So now you're taking that and making it a non-conforming lot down to 175, and then throwing in another lot of 70 feet that's not even anywhere near the 200-foot required. Don't see that as being a logical approach. Also, Corey's lot there, the flag lot coming in behind, I drive by there all the time. His house is so nice. And you're gonna ruin the valuation of that house. This isn't Melrose, this isn't Woburn, it's Derry, New Hampshire. Why, there's tons of land, tons of open space, you can put driveways. And now you're gonna put a little flag lot with a driveway going right beside his house, and then a big house behind it. Doesn't make sense. And it's up to you to stop this. Across the street, my house up on the hill, as you can see, I overlooked that whole field with the 3 lots. I didn't gripe about that, because it is what it is. So I'll look at houses instead of deer. But this, what you're talking about for that lot, that doesn't make sense. Now the easement, you're coming in this driveway and then cutting off for a 20-foot right-of-way, not a walking path. 20-foot right-of-way, running up my whole side lot line, which I own, I bought as conservation land at $10,000 an acre in 2001. Okay, so I don't know what the intended purpose is for that lot back there, but why do you need access 20-foot right-of-way with no barway across it? Anybody can drive up there, up somebody's driveway, and then cut it up through this easement? Doesn't make sense. I have, if you look, notice English Range, where my driveway is, it looks like a white line. That spur to the right is conservation easement road. People park at the bottom of my driveway. And there is an area, a small area there that's allowed for parking for the Conservation Commission. And every day I see people park and they actually drive back part way and then walk to the back. So there's no reason for an easement up the Balls area when they can park there, walk up there to those cornfields you see, and across to any of that adjacent conservation land. I have no idea what that back, it seems very mystical. Conservation Commission wants to buy it, but nobody knows where the money's coming from, and nobody knows what they're going to do with it. Conservation land is meant for recreational purposes. The Balls wanted to keep the land untouched.
So are you 11-88-1 or 88-2?
I own both lots.
And you're telling us that that all that conservation land that abuts the Balls property, or all the land that abuts the Balls property currently is in conservation? My lot, house lot, and the adjacent lot, my house lot and all behind that you see is all conservation. And the one, yes, behind my house is all conservation. Okay.
So I have like 11 acres total. This is a letter from Mr. Paul Dion back on March 25th, 2002. This is to confirm the intended use of the 60-foot wide right-of-way, which is what we've discussed, that goes to the back.
60.
The town will purchase...
That is that path that goes to the right of your driveway?
Yes, you come in my driveway, and then that path, you see it looks like a double line?
Yep.
That's what Farmer Phil uses for his agricultural use, and people use that to walk to the back. So, Mr. Dion said the public access easement will not allow motorized recreation, and the town's reserved right to cross that access will be limited to the 38 acres of town-owned land for emergency and management purposes only. I guess what I'm driving at is that easement on the other side. What is its intended purpose? Why does that have to be there? Does anybody know about a water tank? Anybody?
If you know about a water tank and you want to tell us, please do so.
Well, the town, I've heard from some people, they intend to, or are thinking of putting a water tank up there, a 1.5 million gallon water tank in that conservation area at the top, that big field, to supply pressure for the Derry water system, to supply Chester, Salem, Hampstead, and I don't even have town water. So I think there has to be some restriction, if this goes through, of what's going to be on that conservation land. Is it for all of us to go walk and hunt, ride our four-wheelers, or is there going to be a water tank there? Too many questions up in the air.
Okay.
And if Mr. Meisner knows anything of this, I wish he would tell us.
All right, anything else?
I'm looking at my notes here. Anyway, long story short, I paid a lot of money for the land. It's conservation. I helped the Conservation Commission make that purchase by me throwing in $90,000. So I wanted to keep it in perpetuality. One last thing, and then I'll let you go. Grant of conservation easement. This is from 2001 when I purchased it. The property shall be maintained in perpetuality, primary in its open and undeveloped state, without there being conducted there for any non-agricultural commercial activities, including commercial recreational activities. So if there's a water tank going there, there has to be a limitation on it. So I guess that's all.
Okay, well, you may have answered your own question, but thank you for your input. All right, Mr. Tripp, you have a question? Hang on a second.
Yeah, can,
Sir?
so the conservation land that you own, that's just, is that used for recreation?
It's just a field behind my house.
No, so it's just not, it's not.
Anybody can come on it.
The easement just prevents it from being developed.
That's correct. So it's conservation easement from my house back and then continuing to the rest of the land.
But, so it can be used for recreation, you're not aware that it is.
They hunt on it, they falconeer on it.
Oh, then
Yeah,
it's
I
used
mean,
for recreational use.
Yeah,
Right.
I just, anybody wants to walk across it, they walk across it,
Well, good. Thank you.
so.
Good. All right, anybody else? All set? Very good. Okay, no one else out there, Mr.
Seeing
Venture?
none online, Mr.
Anyone
Chair.
else here in the room wish to speak to this? Very good. Mr. Meisner, come on back up. Give you an opportunity to rebut.
Okay, thank you. So the comments by Mr. Lowenthal with regards to the stone wall, we have no issue with that. We'd be happy to stipulate that that wall will not be disturbed. Additionally, I believe he asked for a no-cut easement along, or a no-cut zone along the, I'll call it the easterly side of the property, which again, we have no problem with that. Those are both issues that would be taken up at the planning board. And so, you know, maybe that might be the proper place to address that. The issue of the easement going to the back, I believe it says somewhere in our application that it's a limited use, and it's intended to be limited to town officials. And I'm not sure.
That'd be town officials or town staff, I guess, or?
I believe that's what the intention is, so potentially, maybe if DPW wanted to go up there to cut down a tree that fell across the trail.
Sure.
There is a trail there now, and this use is, it's intended to mimic that trail that stays there right now.
I see, okay.
And I think that would address the comments.
Yeah, I think I would concur on you, to you in regards to the brush or tree removal, and it's being looked at by planning. It's not unusual for the zoning board in such a case to make a recommendation or to pass that along to the planning board, but honestly, you're right, it kind of is planning's purview, right? Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Corbett?
So one of the questions or statements brought up was something that I was looking at myself, and it's in regard to this flagpole or flag design, as it was referred to, for Lot 1A. And I guess my question is just kind of how you came up with the divisions the way they are, whereas across the street, granted it was a separate case, but a little more uniform, it kind of fit, whereas here, instead of going vertically, I'm just trying to figure out why 1A goes the way it does, rather than kind of divide up the space between 1A and 2A differently.
Right. So what we did there was, we were making an effort to create a 5-acre lot. And the requirement for the 3 acres for the farmhouse sort of puts us into that rectangular shape. And we were looking to come across the line that's parallel with English Range Road. We were looking to come across with something that is more parallel to that. So you see where there's the curve in the road, and our 2 lengths that are along the north line are sort of mimicking that. And that was, so that the land that's to the back or to the west portion of Lot 1A, again, that could easily be restricted either maybe by recommendation of this board or definitely at the planning board level. So that, and again, when Mr. Lowenthal talked about the stone wall or where it teed off, no problem at all. We don't intend on constructing a house way out in the back there for numbers of reasons, not the least being the cost of a driveway getting out there.
I think, are you all set, Mr. Corbett?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to go back to the buffer that was indicated by lot 1186. And that does go to the trees and the brush along the stone wall. I guess it doesn't, because that area is a field, correct?
It is open. There are, and I'm not sure if we can zoom into that portion, but it is open, I'll call it a field, and towards the English Range Road from about where that stone wall is. There are a couple of trees over there, and I had a bit of a discussion with the homeowner there, and the Ball family is certainly willing to work with them. Again, I would say it's probably appropriate at the planning board level for fencing and or hedge lines or something to that effect. And additionally, to move that house back is not a problem. We do have soil testing in that area, so we know that the septic system is usable back there, so we could do that. Okay. We will make every good faith effort to deal with them.
Okay. All right, anybody else have anything, any questions? Are all set? Okay, so that being the case and no one else out there, Mr. Preventure, so we're all set?
We'll check one last time here, Mr. Chair. Seeing no one rise.
All right, so we've considered the board has met its statute requirements for public input on this matter. At this point, we can press on with the, and go into deliberation. If there are considerations or anyone that's on the fence that, particularly where conservation and town council come play into this, Mr. Tripp, you follow me here? If you have the option of asking this to table till the next meeting, if you'd like, or
I would like that.
okay. Anybody else have any concerns or considerations the way I've just expressed?
No, I mean, not necessarily to that, just the concern I have, just kind of reiterated, just to me, the lot 1A, I just have a tough time seeing how it doesn't go against the spirit of the ordinance. So that's just my main concern over all of them, but I would have no problem tabling, if necessary, for town council servers.
All right, so forward thinking, you could, if you have any concerns or questions you'd like validated by the applicant between now and the next time, this would be your time to make those directions. Otherwise, we can take a motion to table until further considerations have been reviewed.
So moved.
You all right with that? Do you have any directions?
My directions, really, I just don't like 1A. Honestly, I'd just like to see the land divided up differently, but
okay.
That's my just my thought, I guess.
All right. We'll leave the door open for your consideration on that, Mr. Meisner. I appreciate that you've been forthright, and you've certainly suggested a lot of ways to accommodate the abutters who've spoken on this matter. Mr. Tripp has made a motion to table this till at least the next meeting. We'll presume it's the next meeting. I'd need a second.
I'll second that.
Mr. Corbett seconds that. All in favor of tabling this till the next meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. We'll see you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Is there a date specific on the next meeting, or?
February 2nd?
February 2nd.
February 7th.
Groundhog Day?
Yes.
You'll be here all day.
We'll do it again. And would the board like to see any additional information from us, revised plans, anything like that, or we working some other
Yeah, so
board gathering their information?
Yeah, my closing comments were that you certainly seem accommodating to the concerns of some of the abutters. I appreciate that. I think there's some question about where our other bodies in the community are going to go, and I think some of us would like to see what develops from that. Mr. Corbett's concern about how this lot line was constructed, if you were to come back and say, well, we've looked at X, Y, Z, and we're proposed to do this, you're welcome. We'll leave that door open for you.
Okay.
But it's not necessary either, but I think you've heard the discussions from the board, so you can get a feel for it. Any questions or concerns, you certainly can reach out to Mr. Mackey during the week, and he knows how to get a hold of me.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we are scheduled to end at 10 o'clock, but it is not late enough for us to postpone or give the option of postponement for the next case. Perhaps there's hopes we can get through it. So we'll call that case up front, and that is Peter Miller and Elizabeth Quo, and that is case number 23-103.
All right. Thank you very much for hearing my case. My name's Elizabeth Quo. Good evening to the chairman and board members. I am, along with my husband, Peter Miller, the owners of 6967 Conleys Grove, and a place that we purchased on December 2021. So I'm a mom of 3, so I appreciate you staying up late. This is way past my bedtime, so thank you very much for continuing and letting us go through this case. I will also say that it sounds like you would like me to jump directly into the variance. I gave you a package. Does everyone have it? And if you don't, I have extra packages.
Yes, we're all set. We do have,
Great.
We have, yes, we do.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
So the property that we're talking about is a place that's on Big Island Pond. It's a lakefront property, which is zoned for recreation, both boating and swimming. I did want to highlight that because the goal today is to ask for a variance to have a short-term rental. If you don't mind, you can skip through some of the pages, but jumping directly into, if you'd like me to talk about the variance.
Yes, so what I'm going to ask you to do in our normal protocols is just go through your 5 criteria to open, and that's we consider sworn statement, and then we'll press on from there. We'll give you the floor.
Perfect. So let's go through conditions for variance 1. There shall be no diminution of value of surrounding properties, and we believe that the purchase price for the property coupled with significant increase in value provided all the improvements that have strongly contributed to the value of the property. I also want to say, out of respect of our neighbors, we instituted new price. Oh, yes, that one? Okay, great. So the second variance is granting a variance would be in the public interest. As noted, so if you look on Airbnb, there's 821 homes listed in Derry, New Hampshire, and surrounding areas. So this would be a precedent today. That means that all of those would no longer be allowed and require the board to have a hearing for hundreds of homes. If this is not the case, this would feel like a targeted hearing towards an owner like me or my background. So I believe in building community of trust, and that I'd like to propose we would continue to look at other contexts of the larger picture of short-term rentals that occur throughout Derry. Variance 2 said that we are granting a variance would be in the public interest. Wanted to focus on the ability to rent can increase property values and surrounding homes. Setting a precedent of no short-term rentals can decrease property values in multiple important ways, as we mentioned. And short-term rentals allow for...
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mrs. Crowe.
Sure.
Just read the 5 points as
sure.
verbatim. Thank you.
And then the third variance, sorry.
Just a minute. I'm hoping I don't have to ask you again.
Okay.
Okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
A hardship must exist, which is inherent in the land in question. The fourth is by granting the variance, substantial justice will be done. And then fifth, the use must not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance.
What is it you're reading?
Oh, I am reading my...
This application.
Oh, you want me to read directly off of that?
Yes.
Great. I'll start from the beginning. Do you want me to start from the beginning?
Yes, please.
Okay. The variance will not be contrary to the public interest because it will bring high-quality tenants to the town of Derry and make it an attractive destination for small businesses to thrive. The spirit of the ordinance is observed because the renters can only stay on property that is fenced in, and we have additional land that doesn't abut our neighbors. Substantial justice is done because the renters will be fully vetted and pay for their lodging ahead of time with quiet hours between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. The values of surrounding properties are not diminished because it enhances the ability of the local businesses to build and increase awareness of Big Island Pond. Number 5, the literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. A, for purposes of this subparagraph, unnecessary hardship means that owing to a special condition of the property that diminishes it from other properties in the area, and no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purposes for the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. This would enhance the surrounding neighborhood and has no diminishing value and would be in public interest. The proposed use is a reasonable one. This will have minimal impact on the neighborhood and abutters. This will only be for short periods of time, and all applicants will be screened for strict criteria, no events or parties, and only short-term stays.
Okay, so now you have the opportunity to elaborate in your own words.
Great. Sorry, thank you very much. So now that makes sense. I'll go back to variance number 1. So no diminution in value of surrounding properties. This one, I believe that we now, number 1, out of a respect for our neighbors, instituted a price point that was higher than we previously thought to ensure clients that are respectful, responsible, and accountable. We also set up a new fine of $2,000 for any new events that occur. This is something we didn't do before, but we set it up to limit the number of people on the property to 10, and also made specific restrictions. We've installed a fence to ensure the integrity of the surrounding properties, and then also allowed short-term rentals to increase property prices. In the second page of the variance, I talked about granting a variance would be in the public interest because, as you heard, we do have, if you look on Airbnb, 821 homes listed in Derry, New Hampshire, and the surrounding areas. So this, especially at this point, we would require the board to have a hearing for hundreds of other homes if this was not allowed. I do think that we have also pulled in some great feedback. So the last 12 comments on Airbnb have always been 5 stars, and there was actually someone that proposed in our home. So it's created a great community. A lot of them said that they would consider coming back to Derry and living here. And also, one really fun fact was that they loved La Belle, and they've increased a lot of the interest in the golf course and other places that are in our surrounding areas. I also want to mention that Westbrook Inn is also within Derry and is also an Airbnb, or it's on Airbnb, and in addition, it's zoned for short-term stays. In addition to Robert Frost Motor Inn, which are both in Derry. For the condition 2, also granting a variance would be in the public interest. Wanted to mention a few thoughts that I had, and this was on the second page after that. So a lot of studies show that a 1% increase in Airbnb listings is associated with an increase in rental rates and housing prices. In aggregate, the growth of home sharing through Airbnb contributes to 1/5 of the average annual increase in U.S. rents, and the average growth rate of Airbnb is about 44%. So in summary, I do believe that this actually contributes to the increase in property values. I also want to mention that setting the precedent of no short-term rentals can decrease property values in two important ways. One is that it precludes a valuable source of income for any owners across all of Derry, and it decreases diversity. And in addition, it also decreases potential buyers who would like the ability to rent as part of their purchase for their own homes. The third thing I want to mention is short-term rentals allow for an important source of money for families in need of additional income streams. And fourth is renters of property bring money to the community, to restaurants, to supermarkets, to stores across all of Derry. And based on their experience, renters, as we mentioned, have told us they want to live in the Derry area. They did not know about Big Island Pond before. Most people only look at Canopy Lake, which we did too, until we discovered how much we liked Derry. The third part about the variance was a hardship must exist, which is inherent in the land in question. This one I actually documented very clearly, so I have a list of all the things that we discovered after purchase. We actually had our inspector, we actually asked him for his insurance because it turns out he did not assess that we had a floor-to-ceiling wall that was made of glass that could move with a hand. I literally could push it, and we bought the place on a sunny day, and the prior owners were only snowbirds, so they never lived during the winter with snowstorms in the place. And so when we found out the first night that we moved in, December of 2021, we had howling winds that were shaking the walls, and we discovered that it was unsafe conditions that we never expected. So I'm going to read here. We actually asked a contractor called Craig Sack & Sons, and I have a statement I can also print and send to you.
So could I just intervene here? What does the conditions of this building and the glass wall have to do with this application and the 5 criteria?
Sure. This is about a hardship. So we have approximately...
Just so you understand, hardship is typically in the land. It's not about a structure that you bought that you didn't do proper due diligence. I'm just kind of warning you to that. I'm going to let you go with it, but I just want to let you know that you're kind of going off the kind of sidetrack here.
Okay.
I'll give you the latitude.
Okay, great. I'll finish up then, and then we can talk, if that's helpful, about the landscaping and the pest control and the things that were required to actually put in additional efforts around the $200,000 of unexpected costs. I won't go into too much detail then, but basically we had a lot of issues with the land itself. When we actually bought it, there was a lot of, within the structure and the land, unevenness, so we actually had to have them come in and move it. They moved a bunch of dirt. They also had to level it out. So I can share also a very clear type of demographic and pictures for it. For the fourth part of the variance, substantial justice will be done. We believe that if we were able to have significant benefit to the community by increasing property values, there's also minimal downside to the neighbors and the properties, and there's higher rates of specific people that can come visit the community and come through, especially with LaBelle and other places. The denial will not be in public interest because the variance has benefits to the community and also has the benefits to the other dairy properties that are on Airbnb. And then the last part of the variance, there must be no contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance. I will say that in contrast to what the ordinance was here to prevent, we ensure a respectful clientele. We want to spend substantial time in this place as a home for our family, and we've heavily invested in the property. I think the ordinance was here to try to prevent transitory folks that would potentially degrade the property and surrounding areas, and we don't believe we will be doing that. We also want to make sure that the owners, we are continuing to be owners instead of just renters or renting out the property. So I'll close and basically talk about my key takeaways for it. It's that we think that this is not a rental property. It's a home for our family and friends. We want to use the fees to offset the significant unexpected costs. We have instituted numerous measures to maximize experience. We've done this most recently too, to put this on our deck and also throughout our house, to please be mindful of your noise levels while outside. Our neighbors are very close and sound travels easily, and the quiet hours of 10 to 8. And we also instituted new penalties and structures for renters to not hold large events. And then last is to say short-term rentals can definitely increase property values, and this is common in Derry and should be considered in the larger context.
So, you all set?
Yes.
So just to frame kind of what you're doing and what you're speaking of here, you know nationally that Airbnb kind of type of structures have had a lot of conflict, similar to some things that this board has been made aware of. Am I correct?
Yes.
Sometimes not properly vetting the people who you're renting to, and also with the people who are renting from Airbnb folks getting to a property and finding that it's not everything it was supposed to be. So I think it shakes both ways. Am I correct?
I think so. I think that's why we have to do proper vetting.
And you're also aware that many cities, larger cities, have put stipulations that short-term rentals, Airbnbs, they've put a lot of guidelines on them if they're to continue to operate. Am I correct?
Absolutely, and I'm happy to follow any guidelines that
Do you reside at this property at all?
Yes, I stayed there last night.
Okay. How often do you stay there?
We work in Cambridge, but we go every other weekend whenever we can, and we also during the summers spend a lot of time there.
Okay. So it's not your regular residence?
No, it's not.
Okay, very good. All right, so I framed that so it's in proper perspective. I'll open it up to the board. Anybody have any questions for Ms. Kuo?
Sure.
Mrs. Moore, anything?
So I have a question more on the Airbnb. I have never rented through Airbnb, so what is proper vetting? Because my kids had rented through Airbnb and they had probably negative bank accounts, so how does that work?
So what do you mean by negative bank account, so I understand?
I'm saying that you said you were going to...
Can you turn your mic on?
It is.
Oh, sorry.
You said that you were there'd be certain fines if they had parties or like,
Yes.
How is all that? You have to explain it to me.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So what we have talked to Airbnb about, because we had an event where there was a party and it was not expected, we told the Airbnb that we were going to now start instituting fines. So up to $2,000 for anyone that has an event at our place. And then in the meantime, though, if they follow the rules, they're following everything, they would basically pay what they would normally pay for one night.
All right, so how do you vet them before they are able to rent the apartment or the house?
Yes, so we talk to them first. We say, and I've rented a few times and I've had people ask me the same questions. How many people do you plan to have come? How long are you going to stay? What's the makeup? Are you going to have events? And you basically say straightforward and tell them we're not allowed to have any events. You have to abide by all these conditions before I accept your offer.
All right, and one last question. The $2,000 fine, what does that go to? Do you just keep it, or?
It's actually, I haven't had to do it yet, but I feel like what I would do is I'd probably I'm happy to do other things. We haven't really thought about what we would do other than it's a deterrent. It's not a goal to make money. It's actually a deterrent to make sure that the property doesn't have events and we don't have ways to disturb the neighbors.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Mr. Ver, Mr. Burgess, Mr. Corbett?
Excuse me. Yeah, I have one small thing. Just a small discrepancy. In your application, you have that you're going to have 10 to 8. In this letter that you sent us, it has 9 to 8.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We ended up doing it 10 to 8.
Okay, that's all I want to make sure of. How do you get your How do you get paid?
Through Airbnb,
Okay.
you mean, they have a banking system where once someone, so there's a few things. You vet the person, they send a request, then you vet the person. If you think they're right, you tell them all the things, the criteria, then they come back to you with, okay, I'm comfortable with that. Then you accept the offer.
Do you get a security deposit before?
You do, you get 50% upfront.
Okay.
Does it pay through like a Zelle or PayPal or something, or is that what Airbnb does, is they just handle the fees?
They handle the fees, yeah.
And I know some of the conflicts that I've heard in the past is that some folks try and pose it as an Airbnb, and then they end up, sometimes the renters get into trouble when they try to bypass that system for whatever
yes.
it is, and that's on the consumer, I'm sure.
That's right. And we still pay, and just to clarify too, it's a nice way to track because you're able to you pay taxes on any kind of profit you make.
Okay. Anybody down on the left there, Mr. Tripp?
Hello. I have a question. Have you been renting the property already?
Yes, we have.
Why are you here then, if you think it's okay to rent it?
Because when you look up on Airbnb, there's so many other dairy properties. I don't think, and I checked to make sure they all had variances, and they didn't. So we were told we got a letter actually recently from Bob Mackey that he educated us on it's a gray zone. Like everyone's allowed to generally, unless if there is an issue. So that's why I felt like a little bit targeted, because we normally, when we looked at Airbnb on dairy, we didn't see all these other places having to come to the hearing.
Yeah. Well, I do know that you're right, it is a gray area. And apparently dairy does have an ordinance that well, it doesn't, it's mute.
I'll speak to that when it's my turn, just to
Okay, well,
give some history.
I'll speak when you're done speaking.
Oh, okay.
Well, if we can isolate up our protocol, it'd be helpful, Mr. Tripp. If you have some ideas you want to project out there and then let Mr. Mackey answer, that would be helpful.
Well, I think it's hard to give a variance for short-term rentals when the town does not have a short-term rental policy. So it makes it difficult. So, which is why I wanted to wait until Mr. Mackey spoke. Okay.
Got it. Let me go to Mr. Mackey just a second. Mr. Donlin, are you still with us?
I am, sir.
Do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
I have a couple, and I apologize. My battery is about to die. I do have my...
Well, I'll tell you what. Rip through them in title, and if you get disconnected, then we'll press on and at least know your feeling.
Yeah, stand by.
Whoa.
That better?
Yep.
All right. I was curious. How do you know if and this is to the applicant, how do you know if any of the rules, quote unquote, are broken?
You mean in terms of when there are events, like let's say there was an event, my neighbors have called me and then I've called the tenants. We can talk about, like, for example, there was a most recent one, day before New Year's, where there were 3 or 4 cars in our driveway. And then one of my neighbors texted me and said, the night's still young, but there is a bunch of cars. And I said, well, the goal for the Airbnb, and what I already told them, was 10 people, no more than 10, and no events. And so they basically had a dinner, and they said, this is not an event, and we'll make sure to stay quiet past 10 p.m. And I didn't hear back, and so I tried to manage if I hear from any of my neighbors.
Okay, and what is your current minimum night setting?
Excuse me, what is my what setting?
The current minimum night setting?
Oh, 350 a night.
No, not the cost per night. Like, do you have a minimum, like you have to stay for 2 days, 5 days, et
Oh,
cetera?
yes, we do. Two nights minimum.
Okay, and then what would your intentions be going forward if you were to have this property dealt with by an agent? How would you go through your vetting process and all that sort of stuff when you weren't so hands-on in the future?
So we both manage, so I talk to some of the existing renters, and then also I have a management company that helps support me. They actually, I've worked with them for a long time in the past, and so they are the ones who oftentimes vet, and they also, I've given their phone numbers to my neighbors in case if they hear back from if there is any issues.
Okay, thank you.
All set, Ms. Donlin?
For now.
All right, you all set?
I have some questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
So split time between Cambridge and Derry, what's the breakdown typically? Which one is the primary residence, would you say?
Our primary residence is Cambridge.
Cambridge. All right. I think that's my only question for right now until Mr. Mackey goes. So I'm kind of curious what he has.
Bounce over to you, Mr. Mackey. Let's point out we're at 10 minutes.
Yeah,
to the
kind of
closing time.
how we got here. Basically, never really thought much about short-term rentals in Derry. And then a while back, we actually had some calls from neighbors concerning two separate properties, one in the downtown area and then one, this particular property out on Conley's Grove Road, which I'm actually kind of familiar with and because of other issues with the previous owners. But anyway, it was brought to my attention that it was being advertised on Airbnb and as well as the other property. So I knew right off the bat that we didn't have any specific regulations with regard to short-term rentals, that sort of thing. So I had to look into the zoning ordinance and see what we did have. Obviously, this property, like the last two properties you were dealing with, zoned low-density residential. If you look at the permitted uses that are allowed in that zone, it talks about single-family dwellings and golf courses and a couple other things. But so you kind of had to look at what the permitted uses were and then had to take a look at what the definitions of those permitted uses were and what else that we might have, which if you look in again, the zoning ordinance, we do have a definition of a tourist home, which includes like bed and breakfast and so forth, which are listed as permitted uses in a couple of the zoning districts. I think CBD, central business and office business, something like that. I also did some research on some case law with regard to this. There was a case out of Portsmouth that has very similar wording in its definitions to what Derry has when it comes to dwelling unit and so forth, which specifically says does not include motel, hotel, whatever, in similar type uses. So based on that, I came, and then I did consult with our town attorney a little bit. I think I gave you all a copy of just some of that email correspondence, and she kind of corroborated with the fact that the way our ordinance is right now really doesn't accommodate for that or allow for that. And that's when, as opposed to, and we're really talking about here, short-term rentals as opposed to a longer term. And I guess it kind of boils down to if somebody's renting it for a longer, somebody has a house and they want to rent it for a longer period, and that's where that renter is going to live, then that is acceptable. Nothing says you can't. I mean, there's a couple fire code rules that come into play and so forth, but everything else being equal, you can do that. But that is where you live as opposed to the short-term rentals, or which is where you stay, but you're not living there per se. And that's kind of the difference here. So based on that, I sent notices out to the applicant, Ms. Quo here, and the other situation kind of resolved itself because they now have a long-term renter. But that's kind of how we got here. I was kind of taken aback when I saw the packet that was produced. I knew there were other Airbnbs out there. I mean, I frankly haven't had the time to go through and do all the research, but the number you quoted at 821, I don't know how you came up with that, but that's a lot.
I actually have screenshots of it.
Yeah. So, Mr. Mackey, if I can just interrupt there.
I've had some initial discussions with the planning office, planning department. I think going forward, that this is going to have to be something that's probably going to be addressed, given the numbers that apparently are out there, will have to be addressed. You know, any change to the zoning, perhaps something put into the zoning specifically to deal with this, and depending on, you know, which way the planning board would want to go with it, staff would have to take it up at a workshop and work its way through, like with any zoning amendment. But for now, we kind of have what we have in the ordinance, and based on that, I had to make the decision that it's not really something that's permitted right now, knowing there's others out there and so forth, but the applicant here chose to apply for the variance in this particular case, so that's kind of where we're at here.
Mr. McAmey, I took a look, you know, it looked like the 821 was surmised of Manchester, Derry, you know, surrounding towns to Derry, whereas kind of looking at the next 3 months, I saw 16 Derry properties, or upwards of 16 properties on
The
each month.
821 to be just for Derry.
Yeah, so that includes kind of like the Derry region, like when you look at the website, but then specifically within the town, I saw upwards of 16 properties over April, May, June timeframe. I guess it could just be a larger question, but in general, what would be done about the rest of those properties in the time being? Is it a matter of somebody has to come forward, or how are we?
No, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, it's something we would have to, again, take a look at, depending on perhaps if it's going to be taken up in the future, in the near future, might determine what direction my department has to go with it. I don't know that I can give you a complete answer at this point.
The other side of it is, do these properties fall into the districts that are permitted? So
they do not. So, and that was my next one. So looking at from where this went, it looked like an Airbnb, to your point, would be allowed in the central business district or the office business district, but it would have to be in an owner-occupied house, so, or a dwelling. So how would the primary residence in Cambridge play into that portion of it? Would that still be deemed owner-occupied, or is that?
I don't think so. I mean, that would typically be your primary residence, would be where it's owner-occupied.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could I also ask a question, or actually make a quick statement? Mr. Mackey also clarified to me that I definitely, at some point, did not need to apply for the variance. I could have also appealed the letter, but I thought it was better to be open about what we were doing and to try to understand what the actual council and the board was thinking. So I could understand more about how to follow the law as opposed to appeal his letter, because I could have gone a different way and just debated the letter. And I think, can you clarify that for the group too? Because that was something that
Oh yeah,
I
you
debated.
could always have filed for, what's the term I'm looking for? You could have filed an appeal of my decision, and then it would be up to the board to make the determination, you know, on whether or not they agreed with what conclusion I came to, or, you know, or not.
And what he's referring to is an administrative appeal.
Right.
Which this
Exactly.
board also has purview over, so you would have been sitting with us either way.
Okay, great. But I also, that way, part of my reason was because I saw there were other Airbnb, so I wanted to clarify if there was even something that should be highlighted in terms of future precedent.
Yeah.
$5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, the clock.
We're going to get to a point where we're going to wrap up. I want to go back to Mr. Tripp real quick because he had questions pending off of Mr. Mackey's comments.
Well, first off, I want to say thank you for coming tonight, because you've obviously discovered a hole in our regulations. You know, I'm pretty impressed with how you're running your business, because you've made a significant investment to make sure that it's, you know, some place that people would like to come. You are familiar with your neighbors, so that if something should go awry, they can contact you. And you have a management company, because, we had a bill last term dealing with short-term rentals at the house, and this was part of the problem, is that, the short-term rentals are typically turned into party houses, and since they're in areas that are zoned residential, it annoys the heck out of the neighbors. You know, so this is why they're watched closely. You know, so hopefully, we can come to a determination about what to do.
Yes.
Because, as you might have noticed, we have no rules.
Excuse me, Mr. Tripp, I'm sorry to interrupt real quick. Mr. Chair, may I make a motion to extend this meeting by 5 minutes?
Very good.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor,
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Okay,
Sorry for the interruption.
No, you're fine.
So, but like I said, you did find a hole in our regulations, and I think we need to look to see what we can do. And first thing we probably should do is find out where these other places are. And
Mr. Tripp, are you all set?
I'm all set.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one
Ms.
question?
Quo, I have a question.
Okay.
Do you own other properties that are Airbnb?
I don't, no,
Do not.
no.
Okay.
This is our second home, so we treat it like our own home.
Mr. Burgess?
Just a real quick question for Mr. Mackey. What's considered short-term rentals?
So based on our definition of tourist home, it would be something being rented less than 14 days.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. That being said, everybody's got questions all set?
Yep.
All right. Folks, I understand you've waited here for quite a while. We're going to have to continue this to the next meeting. I did announce at the beginning of the meeting, as we always do, that our time to end the meeting is at 10. And honestly, for what I foresee, we'd be here another 45 minutes. That being said, I'll take a motion to table this case to the next meeting, please.
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Corbett, thank you, Mr. Tripp. All those in favor of tabling this to the next scheduled meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, Ms. Quo. Mr. Mackey, can we put this first on the next meeting, please? And I realize Mr. Meisner's case is there, but we'll weave that in.
That's right, because we have 3 other cases, so we'll put this one first, then Mr. Meisner's case, and then the other 3.
Very good. So folks, when you get here next time, you'll know you're first up to let your concerns be heard, okay?
Thank you very
Ms.
much.
Quo, you will have an opportunity to hear your neighbors, and you'll have an opportunity to rebut their statements, okay?
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Very good, thank you. That being said, our next order of business is approval of minutes from December 15th, 2022. Could I have a motion to accept those as amended, please?
I'll make that motion to accept as amended.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Corbett, seconded by Mr. Burgess. Any oppositions? Hearing none, those minutes, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. We have no other business before the board other than we received a notice from the upstairs, the town administrator's office advising us that Mrs. Moran and Mr. Ver are up for reappointment. Those are open seats. Mr. Dietzel, your seat also is up in March, so you would have to resubmit
I think it's
for
Donlin.
reappointment. I'm
Potentially
sorry.
Donlin.
I think it's Donlin.
No,
I think that's me, sir.
No, Mr. Donlin is as well, but Mr. Dietzel is
My
as well.
understanding, I end in March.
Dietzel also, yes.
Okay. That being said, that announcement's made. Other than that, we have no other business before us this evening. I'll take.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. I have a second, please. Second. Thank you, Mr. Corbett. As a second on adjournments. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 Opposed? We're adjourned. Have a good night.